If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 26, Hermit Uniqueness. There was a huge black door that looked like a slate in the endless white space, with a being made of pure information floating in front of it. The being is none other than the artificial life or the future hidden sage, that was still being formed. The hidden sage was transparent, and inside him was a purple book with an eye within a triangle symbol in the middle of the cover. The book was fading and slowly blending with hidden sage. The purple book was the uniqueness of Hermit. 3 figures stood in front of it, each with a different expression and complexion, but they all just stood there in silence, with no intention of moving forward. Finally, the woman among them broke the silence. "We really made it through that." With a sigh, Lilith said. "I never thought I'd say this after becoming God, a being who oversaw the entire world, but when she arrived before us, I felt so small in comparison to her, and I felt fear and dread." She didn't hide her fear. She faced and embraced her fear, because only that made her understand her own mortality and weakness more than ever. She was a pillar of the cosmos, her true power vastly outranks us, and truth be told, we only survived due to circumstances and the assistance of others. Ocuses remarked wryly. It was such a close call at the time, and everything could have very well been destroyed. If he ever faced her true body, she would only need to use that blood ocean, and all of his authority would be corrupted by it immediately. And things would have been much worse in the beginning if he hadn't been there. Lilith would have been corrupted almost instantly. He couldn't imagine about future at that time, everything he had built would have been destroyed, and he himself might have died. This simply made him feel powerless in the face of the vast cosmos, and it reminded that he still has a long way to go. It also mainly made him realize his own mortality. He could also die, despite being God above all. He also experienced roller coaster of emotions during this fight than ever before, and he should really take a vacation to Byam and drink traditional tea there, to give himself a break. Was she a pillar? Artisan spoke in a low tone. And is she the one on the moon? This entire journey was extremely impactful for Artisan. The experience and memories of this time will certainly remain with him for the rest of his life and haunt him in his nightmares. Especially when she appeared, he felt pure terror and oppression. He never, ever wanted to go through something like that again. And, just by looking at her, a lot of knowledge poured into his mind, revealing who she was. Artisan knew what a pillar was because Adam had been kind enough to tell him about it before. He knew there was a pillar in the Crimson Moon, but it was still a huge shock to him that he actually participated in the fight against her, and to top it all that, he still survived. To be honest, everything felt like a dream, no, a nightmare to him. He was still perplexed by everything that had happened. She was a pillar created by the original creator. Ocuses responded, but his gaze was drawn to the black door. However, she lost her status and became no different from the other outer gods. But she is still the most powerful of them all. How did she lose her status as a pillar? Lilith inquired, somewhat agitatedly. She, too, was listening in before. She felt this might shed light on many events that were previously in dark to her, such as what happened to the ruined past civilization and her origin. Ocuses, on the other hand, simply smiled and dodged her question. Forget about her. To be honest, I've had enough of her, and thinking about it makes me somewhat sick. He said this with a slight disgust. He fought with Mother Goddess of Depravity almost the entire fight. And, he'd seen a lot that shouldn't have been seen, especially in Layer Abyss, where literally everything was reproducing, mating, and giving birth to abominations that should never have come to light of day. So much so, that he felt compelled to pour holy water from his church over his eyes, to purify him. Lilith didn't ask any further questions, but she fixed her gaze on Ocuses, who seemed unfazed by her scrutiny. That weapon. To break the silence, Artisan finally asked something. Do you like it? Ocuses was amused, and the sword of rupture appeared in his hand, still with some cracks on it, causing him to frown. Indeed, yes. Artisan acknowledged. It is the most powerful weapon I have ever seen. The design is strange. Lilith remarked as she looked at it. Can you tell me what kind of weapon it is? It can be considered a sword. Ocuses replied first, then turned to Artisan, and continued. Despite what it has accomplished, it is still not the most powerful weapon on the planet. Then, he interrupted them, who wanted to speak up. Now. Ocuses spoke lightly while walking forward. First and foremost, we must deal with the situation at hand and get the hell out of here. His tone changed. I really need to get some fresh air. He also put away the sword of rupture. They were even talking freely now, only because the surfoid power that had passed into reality was almost gone after what happened. Except for the residual pollution, which they must still seal, but there is no longer any danger, at least for them. They finally focused on the door in front of them, which had a strange mural on it. Image here. Ocuses narrowed his eyes at the mural, which resembled an illustration of the Tree of Life, Kabbalah, from his previous life. Isn't this just a projection of the entrance? Lilith inquired. The Sephirot would have been right there behind the door. It would have been accessible previously. Ocuses spoke while raising his hand and drawing a sun symbol on the air as if it were a piece of paper. He also put away the thoughts of resemblance that he noticed and focused on the current situation. As he finished it, the symbol began to glow, while the surrounding white space became illusory and began to fade, revealing a library. Seal. He said this as the sun symbol flew towards the door and instantly fused with the black door, causing it to rumble as if it wanted to break free from that symbol. But its resistance faded as the sun symbol appeared gradually on the surface and golden lines began to spread across the door, completely sealing it. At the same time, the white space faded completely, and they found themselves at the far end of a large library, with the door in front of them. Lilith was already in front of the artificial life, when she touched it, and the entire being of the artificial life became illusory and faded away, as if it had been erased from existence. Now, Hidden Sage died completely at Lilith's hands before it could even gain consciousness. Lilith took the purple book and the two characteristics that fell out and examined them for a moment. Then, without hesitation, threw them to Ocuses. Artisan only gave a complex look as he watched the uniqueness and characteristics fall into the hands of the sun god, but he didn't speak up to say anything. Even though he has gained significant power and knowledge during this experience, he is not foolish to challenge a god who has fought a pillar alone for a long time. Finally, Ocuses sighed and looked at the hermit uniqueness and the two knowledge emperor characteristics for which he had come. Actually, throughout the fight, he somehow managed to forget about them, until being reminded after the end of the fight. No one below the rank of King of Angels may enter this place. Using his order authority, he declared. Even though it is sealed, the pollution of Sephiroth here is still very dangerous to those below the King of Angels. All right, let's go. He finally said, as their figures vanished from Moses' ascetic order. As the sun rose, the light of dawn shone through the horizon, illuminating the vast desert on which three figures appeared out of nowhere. Ocuses, Lilith, and Artisan immediately felt divine gazes focusing on them from all over the world. The light of sun in the surroundings then dimmed slightly as a woman in a dark gown appeared. She was none other than Amon-Ines, the first to arrive here, or should he say, the only one who had the courage to come and check, among the gods. Amon-Ines looked at Lilith with obvious concern in her eyes, which were hidden behind the black gauze. Everything is fine. Lilith smiled, a hint of relief visible on her face. We also defeated her. Ocuses didn't hesitate to add, and he immediately felt a range of emotions from the gazes directed at them. He felt shock, complexity, relief, and even a tinge of fear. Then, I will take my leave. Ocuses stated, for he didn't want to stay here anymore, under all of their gazes, and he also needed some alone time. Under the light of the rising sun, his figure collapsed into golden light particles. Chapter 27, Aftermath. After 2 weeks, the rising sun cast a golden glow across the sky, illuminating the world below. The world, which was always in turmoil due to war and strife, has been unusually calm over the last week. Conflicts and wars around the world have ceased without any warning, causing widespread confusion among the populace. But, this was just an afterthought of many, as more were preoccupied with dealing with the aftermath of the disaster that swept the world with the appearance of the blood moon. As the blood moon's power seeped into the world through the barrier, the spiritual world interacted with the material world. Various unspeakable abominations and evil spirits ravaged the land on that crimson night, bringing destruction and death. It wouldn't be wrong to say that the blood of those fallen flowed into rivers across the continent under the illumination of the blood moon. On that crimson night, almost all of the church combat force of gods was dispatched, and angels and saints who were always aloof and indifferent to worldly matters could be seen dealing with the disaster. If this level of disaster occurred in the fifth epoch, almost everything would have been destroyed, unless the gods themselves intervened. However, this was the age of gods, when gods walked the earth and the extraordinary was not hidden from the general populace. Most importantly, the number of Beyonders worldwide vastly outnumbers the future. To be more specific, the main combat force of any church army is demigods, not middle or low sequence beyonders. So, despite the fact that the disaster was catastrophic, it was eventually dealt with by the combined might of all. When everyone expected the wars to continue, it did not, instead restoring the long-awaited peace on the land that many had not seen since the Third Epoch. But those who were knowledgeable and experienced among the Beyonders had a feeling that this was nothing more than false peace before the storm that would sweep the world. Underscore. In a vast river that flowed between mountain peaks, two figures stood around a roaring black knight wielding a sword that appeared to be made of red fire. Dark clouds obscured the sky above, with flashes of scarlet lighting. The black knight was dressed in full body armor and a helmet visor over its head, which only showed two red eyes. The knight was bound under the whip that seemed to be made out of the starlight itself, while he was letting out a hoarse roar in madness, as he gazed at the two figures that were trying to kill him. "What the hell happened, Lucas?" A woman in a traditional blue robe with rimmed glasses on her eyes spoke loudly as she looked at the man in front of her, who appeared to be hesitant. "Instead of hesitating, simply throw the light spear again and try to purify it. I won't be able to keep it up for long. It's pointless, Diana." The man with blonde hair spoke helplessly. Despite being dead and transformed into an evil spirit, it seemed to have endless vitality. "My power can only weaken it, not purify it. I propose that we pray to the Lord." Finally, the blonde-haired man proposed. "This is just a remnant evil spirit of an angel," Diana exclaimed as soon as she heard his suggestion. "We too can handle it." Crack! The whip that was holding the knight down began to break down as crimson blood began to pour out of the cracks in the evil spirit's armor, falling the whip and immediately melting it. When Lucas noticed this, he did not hesitate to throw the spear at the Black Knight. That crimson blood! Diana's pupils constricted as she stared at the crimson blood. It should have been influenced by the blood moon and mutated. She guessed right away. This is a very rare situation, even during this time, because the blood moon caused the disaster to sweep the world and increased the power of spirits under its illumination, but after the blood moon disappeared, this advantage was lost. However, this night appears to be unique. The Black Knight appeared not long ago, after everything had calmed down. It caused massive damage in short of time and it was so powerful that they both had to come forward and besiege it right away. Diana intended to use the mystical reenactment to join the attack on it. Boom! 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 But then a cluster of scarlet lightning bolts descended towards her from the sky, with such force that the mountain around them collapsed as it fell. Diana saw the Black Knight looking at her with those red eyes visible through the mask, and she could feel the spirit's rage and madness, which seemed completely focused on dealing with her, as if to exact revenge for what it had suffered. So much so that the evil spirit ignored the light spear that was heading towards it, but a blaze of flames surrounded it, completely blocking the light spear. Diana didn't waste any time and immediately used the mystical reenactment. A golden shield appeared in her hand, with a golden sun emblem in the center that shone brightly. She immediately shielded herself from the crimson lightning that was falling on her. "God says it's effective," Lucas declared, pointing to Diana. Under his words, the sun emblem on Diana's shield blazed with blinding light. At the time, the entire shield was strengthened. However, just then, a divine aura descended on this location, causing the crimson lighting to stop and vanish, as if it had faded away from existence. The dark clouds then dispersed from the sky, allowing the golden sun to shine through. Ocuses stood in the light of the sun, his hands clasped on the helmet of the Black Knight and lifting the evil spirit from the ground. "I remember you." With a chuckle, he said. "You were the war angel under Ferubity who died under my sword." He took a brief pause, as if recalling something, before continuing with a smile. "Now, as I recall, I caught you and threw you into the dungeons, and ordered that you to be tortured. Later, I honestly forgot about you." Ocuses hated the entire race of devils, so much so, that he didn't hesitate to wage war on Ferubity in the Third Epoch. "It appears that you did quite well after your death. Even grew stronger unintentionally as a result of her." He smiled as he continued. "So, why were you here? To exact vengeance on me. There is one more thing he despises now, and that is her. If he becomes God Almighty in the future, he will especially to go to meet her in the Crimson Moon." Ocuses looked at the Black Knight, and his grip on its visor tightened, causing cracks in it. He saw only fear in the evil spirit's mad eyes as it looked at him. Actually, it indeed had a great deal of hatred for him, and even though it has become an evil spirit, the fact that it was an angel before its fall is more than enough for it to retain some of its consciousness. However, the hatred and blood moon blinded and affected whatever was left, allowing it to attack his country without fear. But, now that it was surrounded by his divine aura, the evil spirit regained some of its consciousness. Please. A painful voice came from behind the Black Knight's visor. To be honest, I don't care what you are going to say. Ocuses spoke indifferently as his smile faded, and he also noticed the red eyes of the Black Knight widening, which seemed to be filled with despair. It will make no difference to your fate. Golden flames erupted from his hands and engulfed the Black Knight's figure. The evil spirit didn't even have a chance to scream in agony before it was completely turned into ashes, and even its soul was destroyed under the burning of his golden flames. Chapter 28, Card of Blasphemy. The capital, Kingdom of Elias. The magnificent city was shrouded in a depressing atmosphere, as the majority of people walked around in black clothes, most of them heading towards the cemetery. Cries and sobs could be heard from everywhere, as some relatives clutched a photograph of their loved one tightly in their hands. While some ladies exiting the carriage in black gowns were dazed and their eyes dimmed, as if they couldn't accept the harsh reality. The church bells ringing and echoing around the city were the only thing that managed to pull them out of their states and make them continue on with their lives, as this gave them a faint sense of support, for they remembered their faith. They hoped that their loved ones would find eternal rest in God's kingdom. In a lavish restaurant in the city's central square, a waitress was carrying a plate of 3 glasses of wine while walking. She finally came to a halt in front of the last table in the row, which had 3 unusual guests. "Your drinks are ready, sir." The waitress placed the drinks in front of the gentleman who had ordered first, followed by others. "Would you like to order some food?" Then she inquired. "Is there something wrong with the service?" she asked, as she noticed the strange expressions of the 2 people who accompanied the gentleman. "We traveled a long way to get here. So, you know." The gentleman in the black tuxedo spoke in their stead, smiling and trailing off at the end. "I understand." The waitress gave a nod. "Do you want to exchange with refreshments instead?" "It's all right." The lady with gold-rimmed glasses over her eyes spoke up, and the blonde-haired man next to her nodded in agreement. "We'll place our order later," the gentleman finally said. Then, she nodded and left them alone. They were none other than Ocuses, Lucas, and Diana, who decided to go around the city after the situation with the evil spirit was resolved, on the suggestions of Ocuses. They toured the city, even visiting a cemetery, the ruins caused by the disaster, and even cathedral, led by Ocuses. To be honest, it was too strange for Lucas and Diana to go to the cathedral where the mass about their Lord was taking place, with their Lord with them. They were aware, however, that their Lord was simply inspecting the damage and loss caused by the disaster. They didn't understand, though, why they had to go there and see everything when their Lord could just use his authority. "Drink it," Ocuses said as he noticed them still in a daze. They nodded and started drinking their wine. Both were thinking the same thing in their heads. Lord has really gained more humanity. Diana was astounded when she realized this. Because her perception of gods had been refreshed as she traveled with her Lord. She could see a distinct change in her Lord now, and she can even clearly sense her Lord's humanity, for her Lord didn't bother to even hide it. While Lucas had previously guessed it, but he has now personally confirmed it. "Lord, the blood moon." Lucas finally asked the most important question for which they needed an answer. The entire incident was disastrous, and he and Diana were frequently called upon to deal with it. It was a real pain for them without the other 2, Angel of Temperance and Angel of Miracles, where one situation was not so good and the other was still within the Solomon Empire. The sudden appearance of the blood moon stunned them, because the blood moon had not appeared on the world since the fall of the ancestor of the blood race. They also knew that when the blood moon appeared, various gods took action. For a brief moment, they believed an all-out gods' war had erupted. They had previously prayed to their Lord about this, but he had not responded specifically to them. Diana put down the wine and focused, but she had a feeling it had something to do with a previous incident that had happened to her. She also intended to inquire about it later. That Ocuses, who was enjoying his wine, paused when he heard the question. He finally put down his glass and said, "When the time comes, you'll know. It is not yet safe for you." He was just making an excuse because he didn't want to talk about this. Ocuses had his own time alone for 2 weeks, during which he rested. He was also constantly double-checking himself because he was overly cautious, due to fact, he was facing a once pillar with many methods that humans cannot comprehend. He was fine in the end, but his alone time wasn't without incident. Because of what happened during the blood moon, the prayers and cries of angels and others poured into his mind. And, the number of souls entering his kingdom increased exponentially, forcing him to concentrate on the situation at hand. To be honest, he didn't think the situation would reach this level on a global scale at first. But, this huge disaster didn't cause any waves in his heart in the least. He did, however, visit some of the affected areas to assess the situation firsthand and how much it affected his kingdom. Then he repeatedly blessed Lucas, Diana, and some saints from his church in order to assist them. This is also when he became aware of the situation with the Black Knight. Is there any other significant news? Ocuses interrogated them, who still wanted to ask more. Diana and Lucas were a little disappointed because, despite everything, they still didn't get the answer for their lord. This is the most recent news, my lord. Nonetheless, Diana responded, taking the newspaper from the very space that rippled as she did so. Ocuses sighed as he read the newspaper and saw how the history had changed at the moment. The greatest invention of the epoch, steam engine. It was boldly stated in the headlines. He wasn't surprised, he knew Artisan could do it after receiving all of the knowledge. Artisan's titles weren't just there as a joke. He was truly a most talented amongst of all. And, because of this, the entire fourth epoch will undergo a significant shift. I can't believe I'll be witnessing the Industrial Revolution so soon. Ocuses thought with some complexity, however, he pushed away these thoughts. Then he took out a brown book and began to carry out his first plan, which he still remembers. He pushed the newspaper aside and opened the book, much to Diana and Lucas's surprise. Ocuses finally came to a halt in the pages where the entire sequence of Hermit Pathway was present. It's the same book where he previously gathered all of knowledge, when he went to save Diana. He used his authority of order, while pressing his index finger on the writings in the book. The power of knowledge in the book is far from ordinary, because it contains the entire path of God and it directly came from the uniqueness itself. The information emerged from the book and quickly became corporeal. Then, under his order authority, they gathered and morphed together. It eventually formed a card, which floated in front of them. The card depicted an elderly man standing alone on the summit of a mountain, holding a lantern in his right hand and a long staff in his left. The Hermit. Ocuses snatched the card from the air and slid it across the table to Diana. This is the card of blasphemy. Chapter 29, Tarot Cards. Diana held the card in her hand as various pieces of information appeared in her mind. Sequence 9, Mystery Prior. Sequence 8, Melee Scholar. Sequence 1, Knowledge Emperor. Sequence 0, Hermit. She couldn't believe she was holding the entire path of God that so many had earned to know, for some would give anything to obtain this knowledge. Yet here she was, holding it in the heat of the moment, without even expecting it in the least. Now, her faith in her Lord and fate itself had never been higher than it was now. Does it have the entire path of God? Lucas inquired, his gaze never leaving the card in his hand. He was well aware of what blasphemy represented, and the card was something that their Lord had created himself, so he can easily guess what it might be. Ocuses, on the other hand, was just watching them from the sidelines, enjoying his wine. Yes, the Hermit. Diana responded, while she also found a lot of the depiction of the old man in the card to be far from simple, and it somewhat correlates with the essence of the Hermit pathway itself. She truly felt her Lord's might once more, everything he does has a very deep meaning. She then passed the card to Lucas, whose gaze was literally too hot on the card, as she could feel the surrounding temperature rise. Lucas immediately accepted the card and fell into a trance as he digested the full path of God for the first time. Meanwhile, Diana's mind kept repeating the knowledge of the promotion ritual and formula. She was also wondering if she had a chance, even if it was slim. She has desire to advance further in order to become stronger, because she had a terrible feeling about future from the knowledge given by her idol, the mysteries of the Black Door, the blood moon and calamity that followed. This notion was strengthened when she saw her Lord giving her this without even batting an eye, and she even had a hunch, her Lord hasn't finished, he might even take out something else, which could be the very thing she always wanted and requested from her Lord, by doing a lot of tasks and raising a lot of contribution. Her Lord, on the other hand, was anything but generous. He can be very strict and expects a lot from others in return if they want anything from him. She knew there was more to this than meets the eye. This card, my lord. Diana finally said something. Do you find anything special in the image of card? Interpreted Ocuses, while placing the cup below in the table. Yes. Diana nodded and said as she felt her lord's inquiring gaze. The card has a lot in common with the essence of the hermit. The old man is alone on his path of knowledge, and the lamp he holds only illuminates his front and not the entire path, indicating that he must proceed to see what lies ahead, knowing that not everything will be revealed at once. Ocuses gave her an appreciative look before talking something out of nowhere and setting it on the table. He no longer bothered and simply handed it to her. For the next war, some powerful archangels will be required to at least make a stand against the forces of true Creator and Solomon while they deal with them. Diana is the perfect fit right now at the moment, which correlated with his plan. There were two things on the table, the characteristics of the Knowledge Emperor and a deck of cards. A silence descended as soon as he placed those things. Diana stared at the characteristics in the table, her mind blank. Even though she had anticipated it, seeing it in person had a profound effect on her. As it stands in this day and age, being promoted to angel is the best one can hope for, and the chances of being promoted to archangel in a path with no god are so slim that they can be dismissed entirely. Almost all of the remaining paths have archangels in place, or sequence 1 characteristics are already in the hands of gods and king of angels. So, unless someone is blessed by fate, one can imagine the chances are too low. Diana was aware that her path lacked archangels, but the characteristics of the Knowledge Emperor were already in the hands of the king of angels and gods. Even though, she requested a lot to her lord about this. She didn't have much hope, because anything involving the gods and the king of angels is bound to become complicated. Just like what happened with her idol before. Diana almost jumped out of her seat when she remembered. The hermit uniqueness. Did the lord get it? The Knowledge Emperor here should be the one that was owned by her idol and the lord has it now, so there is a good chance that the uniqueness. As soon as she thought of this, her heart leapt with joy. Nonetheless, she managed to resist the urge to inquire. She was well aware that nothing in this world was free, and her lord was far from generous. Diana. Ocuses called out as she noticed her dazed state, and her eyes never left the characteristics. Was it too much of a shocker for her? Lord, this. Diana strutted, trying to organize herself, after jolting out of her daze. Take it, Diana. Ocuses said this in between sips of wine. You need to be promoted because I will be assigning you to face a formidable foe in the coming chaos. He concluded with a smile. There it is. Diana was well aware that whoever she was about to face would be anything but ordinary, and could even be fatal to her. But she knew that this was the only chance that she could advance in her path. She didn't show hesitation because she knew her lord would be disappointed in her because this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that many wouldn't even get. Thank you very much, my lord. Diana said after she had calmed down. I will face whoever you ask. She said it with confidence, despite having very bad feeling afterwards. Then, almost immediately, she took the Knowledge Emperor characteristics from the table and placed them in her separate space. She also noticed a deck of cards on the table, which she had previously overlooked subconsciously. Ocuses simply chuckled as he noticed this and turned to see the dejected eyes of Lucas, who was still starting at the place where the characteristics was. You, too, Lucas, will get your chance in the future. He said lightly, leaving Lucas perplexed, because almost every pathway interchangeable with the sun pathway already has gods. Ocuses wasn't joking when he said that. With the addition of hermit uniqueness, which he can use, his overall strength has increased significantly. Just like Amon Ines, she holds the moon uniqueness, which is what made her much stronger than other gods. Then, let's move on to the final thing. Ocuses said, as he ignored the expressions of Lucas and Diana, after hearing that. He took the deck of cards on the table and spread it all in the table. There were total number of 22 cards with Roman number on top of each of card and unique image related to its name in the below. The beginning of the cards was the 0 the Fool and the ending was the 21 the World. The Tarot Cards. Chapter 30, Ritual. The Fool, the Sunday. The Death. Lucas examined the various images and names on the cards on the table. The cards, no matter how closely examined, gave off the impression that they were nothing more than ordinary cards. They didn't give the divine and mysteries aura like the previous card of blasphemy. However, the eerie similarities that this card has with sequence pathways, for some of the names of the cards, such as the Fool, directly states the sequence 0 names. This alone caused Lucas' thoughts to wander, as if he could already see his lord's grand plan, which may even cause the world to change. The Hermit. Diana immediately focused on the card that was within 22 among them and then looked at the others. The Fool. The sun? The death? The hanged man? The moon? The emperor should be related to the Black Emperor. And the wheel of fortune is self-evident. Temperance ought to be the chained pathway, and the judgment should be the justiciar. These cards should be closely related to all of the pathways. Why is the Fool at the start? Is there anything unique about the Fool? Each of these cards also contains a deep mysticism reference. Diana's mind was racing with questions and thoughts as she stared at the cards. The more she looked, the more she realized how significant this was. Ordinary people may think the cards are insignificant, but in her eyes, they are priceless treasure. The Hermit card was a card of blasphemy, so these cards as well. As she looked at the cards, a terrifying thought passed her mind. These are not the cards of blasphemy. Ocuses chuckled, exposing their innermost thoughts as if he could see right through them. Diana and Lucas were slightly disappointed, because they expected their lord to orchestrate the grand plan that would shake the world itself. Their imagination is truly amazing. Ocuses found it amusing to see through their guesses. He wasn't going to do what Roselle did and spread the cards of blasphemy for destined people. This would have disastrous consequences. He was almost certain that in the original timeline, Roselle became the enemy of all the gods simply by doing this. It makes no difference whether it was intended or not. Have you considered which knowledge you will spread for the ritual? Without revealing what the cards were, Ocuses asked Diana. My lord, I am considering it, and I'm pretty sure I'd go with the second epoch. Diana responded, as she had given much thought about the ritual. However, she is unsure which knowledge would be ideal and acceptable to the rest of the world. Ritual, spread the most abstract and diverse knowledge from the forgotten era and let it be known around the world. You should be aware of this and proceed with caution, right? Ocuses said this with a serious expression. I don't want gods knocking on my door. Nothing about the second epoch can be revealed to the public in this way. To top it all off, her ritual's knowledge requirements should be abstract and diverse. This kind of knowledge was plentiful in the second epoch, and it could also easily cause an ordinary person to pollute it. That's why I'm still undecided, my lord, and I was planning to seek your advice. Diana nodded solemnly, knowing that if she was not careful with her ritual, it could very well lead to her demise. Even her lord would be powerless to save her. Ocuses was not surprised by her predicament. After all, strict requirements are what have kept archangels from being born in the hermit pathway until now, and not everyone is Roselle, who has knowledge of past civilization, so he didn't have to worry about this ritual in the least. Spread this. Ocuses finally revealed his true intentions with a smile. These are referred to as tarot cards. These meet all of your ritual's requirements. He pointed the tarot cards in the table. Then, Diana took the Fool card in her hand, and a flood of information about its meaning and mysticism appeared in her mind. She knew this satisfied one of the requirements, but there was still one more. My lord. Diana wanted to ask some additional questions about this. This will satisfy all requirements. You have nothing to be concerned about. Ocuses said it again, seeing her concern. The significance of the tarot cards clearly fulfills the requirements of this ritual. Thank you very much, my lord. Diana accepted this with deep gratitude, knowing her lord would not put her in danger. Despite once again having the impression that this cards and her lord's motives were anything but simple. Ocuses' intentions were not obvious simple, he is far from being generous either. He was using Diana's ritual to hide his true intention from being known by other gods. This was an experiment to strengthen his control on the hermit's uniqueness. Even though he could use it, there are still a number of issues. He really wanted to strengthen his power in order to prepare for the future. He devised this method after witnessing Hermit's authority over occultism. Even though the tarot cards on the table appear to be normal, they are not. He personally created those with the uniqueness, and if the tarot cards are speared now, they will be completely related to him under the authority of occultism. As tarot cards gain popularity around the world in field of occultism, this will have an impact on the authority, potentially increasing his control as well. Ocuses could only hope that his plan would succeed. Also, the tarot cards from a previous era being introduced by his angel will not reveal his secrets. As, tarot cards were not first introduced by Roselle after the cataclysm, but by ancient sun god. Yes, the ancient sun god had a habit of generously imparting past civilizations' knowledge to those close to him, but he never intended to impart all of it to mankind. He and the other kings of angels had done a lot of tarot divination with Ouroboros. Ouroboros also most likely still has the tarot cards given to him by the Creator. How about them, my lord? Lucas inquired with concern, when he noticed that this topic had concluded. Are they fine? He was referring to the Angel of Miracles and Temperance. He's all right. Ocuses responded. My messenger prayed to me in the midst of the chaos, he will return soon enough. As for the other, things are still complicated. His voice trailed off as he considered the situation of the Angel of Temperance. This immediately made Diana and Lucas' hearts sink, as the Angel of Temperance's condition had deteriorated, the last time they had met him. They've been together for a long time and have been through a lot. As they learned of his condition before, it caused them fell at loss and pain. Don't worry, his situation hasn't gotten that bad yet. Ocuses sighed, for, he once again felt powerless, as even he couldn't solve his Angel of Temperance problem right now. It's yet another bitch from the cosmos. While drinking his wine, he thought with slight frustration. But, at the very least, his words made those two feel better. Let's order. Shall we? Ocuses finally put his thoughts about his angel and cosmos aside and said with a smile, to lighten the depressing atmosphere. It's on me. Diana and Lucas finally smiled as a result of his words. They went on in the light of the sun that shone through the window illuminating their figures. Chapter 31, Amon Isis. After a month. Northern Continent, Kingdom of Night. Dong. 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 As the believers entered the Gothic-style church under the light of the rising sun, the church bells rang loudly. This vibrant street was filled with passing carriages and bustling crowds. The ladies' and children's chatter and laughter were ever present. The newspaper boy could be seen shouting about on the turn, with the most recent news. There was also an unusual store in the long line of buildings. The store was painted white, a stark contrast to the city's entire style, as all of the buildings were mostly dark in color. There was a black sign with the words Tarot Divination and the price written on it. The passing people, on the other hand, paid no attention and ignored this peculiar shop. A beautiful woman walked among the passing crowds, her long black hair reaching her hips. She was dressed in a black layered gown with sparkling lights that resembled stars in the night sky and a black gauze over her face. Despite walking among the throngs, everyone avoided and ignored the black-haired woman subconsciously. Dipsite woman's temperament and aura were divine and otherworldly. The black-haired woman eventually came to a halt in front of an alley and turned to walk into it. As she walked into the alley, the sun's rays dampened, leaving nothing but thick darkness in front of her. The darkness moved frequently, as if it contained demons that seemingly emerged from the terrible nightmares itself. Even after seeing this, the black-haired woman continued walking into the darkness. With her in it, the surging darkness calmed down and cleared away, revealing the scene within. A girl's whimpering voice echoed, and the ground was stained with crimson blood. In the midst of it all, there was a corpse of a man with no upper body and a teenage girl with a torn dress that revealed most of her body kneeling on the floor with a white bone knife in her hand, which she was tightly clutching. Her hands and blade were covered in crimson blood. Her eyes were wide and never left the corpse. The entire scene revealed the tragedy that occurred here. The white bone sword was coated in darkness, which frequently let out wisps, causing the light in the surroundings to dim. The black-haired woman looked at the teenage girl in silence for a moment before approaching her. The girl sensed someone approaching her and immediately pointed her sword at the black-haired woman. Please don't come me near me. The girl stuttered as tears streamed down her cheeks. Please don't I beg you. With panic in her eyes, she pleaded, her voice becoming smaller as she spoke. Even after seeing this and walking forward to her, the black-haired woman's expression behind the gauze didn't change in the least. No. As she realized this, the girl let out a painful cry. However, she was immediately drawn into an embrace, which swept away all her fear and panic, and she almost felt like she was back in her mother's embrace. As her grip loosened, the white bone dagger in her hand fell to the floor. But there was no sound of it hitting the floor, as if the dagger had vanished in the middle. Everything is fine. A black-haired woman's ethereal voice sounded, and she immediately felt completely relaxed. All the painful experiences that had been replaying in her mind vanished, leaving her completely tranquil. You are safe now. The black-haired woman raised her hand to the air, then the black veil appeared in her hand. She used it to cover the girl body due to her torn cloths. The black-haired woman finally let the girl out of her embrace after the girl stopped trembling, but the girl didn't let go and was still clinging to her. The black-haired woman's tranquil eyes finally showed pity as she looked at the girl. Can you tell me your name? She inquired softly of the girl. The girl finally separated from her embrace as she heard her voice and clung to the veil draped over her, then she looked at the lady before her in silence for a moment and whispered. Ariana. What a lovely name. The woman with black hair complimented. Yours? Ariana questioned after some hesitation. Ines. The black-haired woman replied lightly, then asked. Where is your mother? She passed away. Ariana whispered this as tears welled up once more. Attempting to save me from the monster raging across the blood river. I begged and prayed to the goddess countless times, but there was no hope. Her eyes became dim, while her voice became quieter. She left me alone in the world, with broken promises and a white dagger. Dagger. Ariana panicked when she realized the dagger had vanished. Here. Ines handed over the dagger, that she was holding in her hands. Ariana snatched the dagger from her grasp and turned to face the Ines with vigilance, but she immediately felt her eyelids become heavy and her vision was becoming blurry. I am sorry, Ariana. She eventually fell asleep after hearing the Ammonine's voices. Ines looked at Ariana in silence, her expression couldn't be seen, as it was completely hidden by the black gauze that covered her face. When she turned around, a man with black wings appeared behind her. Bring her to church. Make certain she grows up well. Ines spoke to her angel in an etheric voice. Her mother was Angela, one of our martyred saints from the Crimson Night. She stated. Yes, lady. The angel replied and inquired with confusion. We could have done it for you, lady. Ines interrupted him. I'm here for another reason, but I noticed her as well on the way. The angel nodded, before taking Ariana and disappearing soon afterwards. Ines finally turned to look at the man's broken body lying in the pool of blood and raised her hand, as an ethereal soul was pulled out of his body and reached her hands. Without even looking at it, she crushed it in her hands. The man's body then faded out of existence along with his soul. Finally, Ines approached the white building with the tarot divination sign written on it and entered it. Ring. The bell rang as she entered the strange and dimly lit room with only one table in the center and a man sitting on one of the chairs, holding a deck of tarot cards. There was crystal ball on the table with candles. Ines, sit down. Looking at his customer, the man with short white hair said calmly. I never took you for a charlatan, Ocuses. Ines said with an actual smile, but as she looked around the room, she felt a sense of déjà vu. Chapter 32, Tarot Divination. Ocuses ignored her remark and spoke solemnly. Are you here for tarot divination or not? Ines finally pressed down the feeling she had when she entered this place and went along with him surprisingly. Yes. She said this as she entered the room and sat in the chair facing him. Let's see, if you can divine for me. Her ethereal voice echoed throughout the room. It's not easy to divine for a god, and it may even cause huge ripples in the river of destiny while doing so. This is especially true for her, who was once known as the goddess of misfortune. Oh! Ocuses' brows were raised, his golden eyes glowed with a light purple light. Ines, are you underestimating me? After everything that has happened? No, far from it. Ines responded as the image of the Ocuses stabbing and betraying the creator without hesitation flashed through her mind. I was simply stating the facts, Ocuses. But she continued to speak in an ethereal tone, without any change. Facts? Hey! Ocuses spoke while his lips turned upwards to form a smile and his golden eyes turned completely purple and shone lightly. Let's find out, shall we? He took the remaining decks and gathered them all together, then stacked them all together into a deck and asked her in between. What would you like to learn from the tarot reading? Ines remained silent for a brief moment as she gazed at the tarot cards in his hand, various past memories flooding back to her, evoking various emotions in her heart, most importantly loneliness, sadness, and nostalgia. Despite this, she didn't seem to show much change on the surface, quietly gazing at the cards. Present, past, and future. Finally, she stated, the most common and popular type of tarot reading from her past life. It took her a moment to respond, and Ocuses was patient, as if he expected this. Ocuses said quietly as he pushed the deck of cards towards Ines. Shuffle the deck and cut it. Ines took the deck of cards in her hand and inquired, a smile visible behind the gauze. Why? Ocuses, can't you do it on your own? I didn't expect you to ask for my assistance. She was referring to her authority over misfortune. No, just normal shuffle. Ocuses retorted, shaking his head, and continued to say in a deep tone. Everyone's fate can only be unraveled by themselves, and I can only read it. What he said was a deep connection to Hermit, as Hermit can only peer into fate, nothing more. As he finished, the already dim lights on the wall went completely dark, plunging the entire room around them into seemingly endless darkness, with only the candle on the table giving illumination, which also began to flicker, as if it might also extinguish. As a faint and illusory whooshing sound echoed from the darkness, the air became thick and slightly mysterious. A colorless river appeared and flowed around them, with them in the middle of it all. The River of Destiny. Ocuses and Amon-Ines were unfazed by the changes in their surroundings. Amon-Ines, on the other hand, was taken aback when she heard his sentence. She felt as if she had already been here and done this divination for someone else in place of Ocuses. The feeling of déjà vu returned, but she was well aware that she hadn't done divination for anyone in a long time. Something is wrong, she thought, but her hands didn't stop shuffling and cutting the deck before placing it in front of Ocuses. She pressed down this feeling while also deciding to check later. Let's get started. Ocuses stated this while reaching for a card from the top of the deck and placing it to the left of the Amon-Ines. This card represents your past. While placing the second card in front of Amon-Ines, his voice became quieter. This card represents your present. This card represents your future. He finally placed the third card to Amonis's right. So, which one would like to know first? Ocuses asked solemnly, his purple eyes deep as he looked at the woman in front of him. Amon-Ines remained silent for a brief moment before speaking. Future. Ocuses nodded and flipped the card to Amonis's right, causing the calm river of destiny to surge, which even alarmed two snakes of Mercury who were going about their business elsewhere in the world. A skeleton dressed in black armor, riding a white horse was depicted on the card. The skeleton carries a black flag decorated with a white, 5-petal rose. A royal figure appears to be dead on the ground, while a young woman, child, and bishop can be seen pleading to the skeleton in armor. It was numbered 13. Death. Death represents the end and the beginning, Ocuses said, his voice eerie. It can be regarded as a never-ending cycle, that no one can avoid. It appears that your future is anything but calm, Amon-Ines. You might even find yourself in situations where present. Amon-Ines interrupted him rudely, her tone unchanging, but her deep gaze fixed on the death card. Ocuses did not express anger at being interrupted. Keep in mind that the tarot cards only provide guidance on your path. As he flipped over the card in front of Amon-Ines, he said in light tone. The card featured a revolving wheel. 4 winged creatures sit atop clouds in each corner of the card. It was branded 10. Wheel of Fortune. Ocuses explained calmly. It symbolizes change, luck, and, most importantly, a turning point in one's life. Don't you think it's quite accurate, Amon-Ines? After everything that has happened, you are on the verge of a new era. Indeed. Amon-Ines spoke ethereally, her voice devoid of surprise, as if she had anticipated this. The past? She inquired, her voice finally changing to a low tone. Ocuses Purple's eyes lit up with anticipation as he turned over the card to the left of Amon-Ines. A colorfully dressed character was depicted on this card, wearing ragged headgear with a stick over his shoulder. There was a bindle hanging on the end of the stick and a puppy was following behind him. It was numbered 0. The Fool. Ocuses' voice echoed in the deep darkness, and the very river of destiny that was flowing froze with the appearance of the card. The Fool? As she looked at the card that appeared, Amon-Ines felt complex. She looked up at the endless darkness, as if she wanted to peer through it, to see the endless grey fog and that blurred door. It's interesting to see the Fool in someone else's past. Ocuses said this while smiling and looking at Amon-Ines with deep purple eyes. It represents a new beginning, one that is full of infinite possibilities. It is not the same as the death, before. It appears that your past has been anything but ordinary, Amon-Ines. He implied. For a brief moment Amon-Ines and Ocuses stared at each other in silence, without saying anything. Then she abruptly raised her hand and took the 3 tarot cards from the tables. I'm bringing these cards with me. She said this without responding to his previous divination. Ocuses didn't stop her and let her take it, but a winning smile flashed across his lips for a brief moment, which Amon-Ines completely missed, as she was placing the cards in her gown. Enough already, Charlton. Despite the divination, Amon-Ines still addressed him as such while speaking. What exactly are you here for? Chapter 33, Deal. Ocuses abruptly put away the tarot cards and snapped his fingers. Snap. Their surroundings changed abruptly as twilight dawned on them, illuminating everything around them. They were sitting at the same table and chair, but they were no longer in the store or in the endless darkness, but on the snowy mountain's edge, where a chilly wind blew. The vast flights of wheat grew beneath the mountain range, and the golden light of the sun shone on these flights, giving them a more golden hue. From the top of the mountain, it appeared as if a golden ocean lay beneath them. The crystal snow landed on the table, which now had 2 cups filled with coffee. Here. Ocuses handed the cup to Amonines, who looked at it strangely before taking it. Don't you already know why I'm here, Amonines? Ocuses chuckled as he took a sip of coffee and immersed himself in the scenery in front of him. You intend to start a war on Solomon and True Creator. Amonines spoke as she drank the coffee, which she hadn't had in a long time. This brought back a lot of memories of past. She was also looked deeply at Ocuses, who was immersing himself. She and Ocuses, on the other hand, have known each other since the Second Epoch. Their relationship was, to be honest, she didn't know how to describe it. For a god, it's difficult to express anything in human terms, even if they were once human. However, Amonines could only describe their relationship as on pretty good terms in a roundabout and vague way, if she truly wanted to express it. She and Ocuses had spent a lot of time together during the Third Epoch, as he had been assigned to her by the ancient sun god to deal with a variety of issues in that era. Those were actually good times, at least for her. However, everything changed after the fall of ancient sun god. Yes. Ocuses spoke softly, his face illuminated by soft sunlight. Solomon must die in order to bring down Sasrur. He cannot continue to rule over the continent. His time has passed, and it's truly amusing to consider that even after his death, the world is still dominated by him. With a complicated smile, he said. He was referring to True Creator as Sasrur, as True Creator was an amalgamation of Sasrur and the humanity of the ancient sun god, which also what caused him to go insane. Sasrur. Amonines whispered the name with a slight ripple in her heart and went on without any change on the surface. Indeed, everything that happened after that was still dominated by him. Don't you remember that banquet that caused quite a stir because of you, Solomon and others? That banquet. I recall that, despite being an angel, Solomon was allowed to attend because the Creator took notice of him and predicted that he would change the world. Ocuses said with smile. To be honest, I didn't take it seriously at the time. Because the Creator always gave such vague prophecies to many, who didn't amount much in the end. Oh, and most importantly, Solomon was truly one of a kind. He literally used various methods to gain our favor and get on the good side of me and other kings of angels. Given what had happened, he expected to succeed, but he was utterly humiliated by us in the end. However, look how he turned the tables on everyone. Amonines reputed. I honestly didn't expect Solomon to join forces with the True Creator, despite the fact that he would face all of us. Well, nothing could deny that Solomon was a daring man. He took advantage of the opportunity, despite the grave danger, and eventually succeeded in suppressing us all. Ocuses stated as he gazed at the setting sun. In a way, he retaliated against me, Hiraburgan, and Leodro by labeling us as evil gods in his kingdom. I heard that some people there are even afraid to recite our divine names because of this. What do you say, Amonines? Ocuses finally inquired, turning to face her. You expect me to persuade Leodro and Hiraburgan? Amonines remarked lightly. Yes, if we all get together. There will be war right away. At the very least, Hiraburgan will be civilized. But I can't say the same for the other though. Ocuses smiled. You are the only one who can bring them together. I'll check on Batial and Umbella on your behalf, Ocuses said with a chuckle after noticing her silence. Don't you think it's a perfect deal between us, Amonines? Fine. Finally, Amonines nodded. However, it'll be difficult to actually succeed for those two without any. The uniqueness of the justiciar will soon fall into the hands of the Solomon. Ocuses said simply, making Amonines silent. And considering the threat of Cosmos, it shouldn't be too difficult. I will also bring necessary evidence to the meeting. You really thought of everything before coming to meet with me. Amonines spoke up unexpectedly. You should have planned this for a long time, didn't you? It's different from who you used to be, for you've changed a lot from the last time we meet. The Ocuses she knew before was prideful and filled with vanity. He was a firm believer in power and disdains asking for help from others, even in dire circumstances. He frequently prefers to deal with situations with crushing force rather than taking a roundabout path. Yet, here he was. Ines had never been more aware of the passage of time and its impact on others than she was now. It was amazing to see how much change was happening around her, yet she had remained the same since she ascended. She suddenly realized how much humanity she had lost along her path. After experiencing everything about humanity and divinity, one is always bound to change. Ocuses softly stated, Ines, you should know more about this than I do. Isn't that right? He implied. Indeed. Ines responded, much to Ocuses' surprise. However, she did not delve deeply. You notify me of the date, and then we can finalize the alliance of 6 gods at that time. She spoke to him without looking at him. Ocuses noticed Ines acting strangely, but he didn't pry further because he knew her character well. All right, then. He gave a nod. Do you want to accompany me? The first Knowledge Emperor is about to be born. It would be a sight to behold, and your presence might help. He extended an invitation. I apologize, Ocuses. Ines spoke in the same ethereal tone that had not changed. In any case, congrats on having an archangel under your seat. Her tone softened as her figure became illusory. I'm looking forward to seeing you again, Ocuses. So until then. She faded away, leaving Ocuses alone on the mountaintop, who didn't show much change after seeing her sudden departure. Finally, Ocuses sighed as he turned to face the setting sun with his heterochromatic eyes, which were now golden and purple, symbolizing the authorities he now controls. Chapter 34, Knowledge Emperor. The twilight sun cast a glow across the tall mountains as 2 people stood on the mountain's edge. You've got this, Diana. Lucas stated, in order to boost her confidence in her ascension. Remember when I was nearly killed by demonic wolves? You were like my destined knight, coming to my aid, and it surprised me because it was the first time I had seen a violent woman like you, who didn't hesitate to tear apart the wolf and didn't flinch when the blood died on you. It was kind of hot, and I must say, you are the most heroic of us all. He said it with a grin on his lips, to lighten the tense atmosphere around them. It is not easy to be promoted to Archangel as there is a high risk of losing control. Despite preparing and performing the ritual for a long time, many people have failed in the ascension. If you like me that much, Lucas, you could just ask me out. Diana said, and her words made Lucas smile, but it quickly froze at the next words. However, I should say that I will reject you, because you are too much of a sissy for my taste, for I can't accept a man who nearly fainted in fear at the sight of that little wolf before. She remarked mockingly. This bastard dares to call this lady violent. She reflected, but she couldn't deny that his words did help to ease her pressure and mood. Diana laughed when she noticed Lucas' twisted expression. That is not correct. You're twisting the whole situation, Wolf. Lucas was defending his honor with all his might, but Diana's laughter suddenly froze as she noticed a flash of pain in his eyes, which he didn't hide well. Her instincts as a sage can't deceive her. Oh my goodness! Does he really have feelings for me? She didn't expect this in the least. Her heart, which had just calmed down, had just set off a massive wave. Lucas came to a halt as well when he noticed her odd expression on him. Did she notice it? He could feel a little panic in her heart, but also a little excitement, which he himself didn't notice as he observed her reaction. However, much to his dismay, she didn't change much after that. I'm going, Lucas. Diana spoke up after she had calmed down. She cannot allow herself to be affected in this way, especially now. The next step is critical for her. She'll deal with Lucas and the rest later. I can't afford to waste any more time. She paused and said, slightly hesitantly. Thank you for being here and for all the times before. With a relieved smile, she finished. Go ahead, Diana. Lucas put his jumbled thoughts aside and sincerely blessed her, knowing of the situation as well. You will undoubtedly succeed, as the Lord is also watching over you. I've already planned a lavish banquet for the occasion. Diana walked to the edge of the mountain and turned to face him, holding a potion in her hand. She didn't hesitate any longer, opening the lid and drinking the potion in one gulp. I can hardly wait, Lucas. After finishing the potion, she finally said with a smile on her lips. You should leave now because things are about to get out of hand. Lucas also wanted to leave, but when he saw what she did, his eyes widened. She jumped off the mountain, with an excited smile on her face. He didn't hesitate to dash to the edge and yell at the top of his lungs, all the while staring at her falling figure. Diana! You are truly a mad woman. What the hell were you think? Before he could finish, a blinding pure light fell on his figure, teleporting him out of this place. Diana chuckled as she fell, when she managed to hurt him. She was also fully concentrated at this point, so her fall had no effect on her at all. Regardless, she decided to jump on a whim. Well, he's not completely wrong. She was thinking as she felt a change within her body, as her body began to become illusory at an alarming rate. She disintegrated into thick and intricate knowledge, converting into an existence to that of a flux of information. The entire mountain range, as well as the flowing river between the peaks, the clouds, and the vast plains near the mountains, all lost their sense of reality, for they had been broken down into most fundamental blocks of information. Everything she had learned from the beginning of her life until now was included in the knowledge that had broken away from her. It made no difference whether it was insignificant or extraordinary. The flux of knowledge included everything. From second epic legends and rumors to secret knowledge that could pollute many simply by knowing it. It was a truly chaotic, yet miraculous sight to behold at the time, because every piece of her knowledge was transforming, and they all now possessed power. Many divine gazes fell on this place, but none dared to interfere because the aura of sun covered the entire place. Diana felt that information from all over the world was infiltrating her knowledge. Without her previous experience, she would have lost herself right away. This was a far more dangerous state than when she was promoted to sage. Because the information infiltrating her came from all over the world. They gravitated to her, as if she were a magnet attracting them all. However, her knowledge bore a distinct imprint of her, and it entailed a tremendous amount of power. It was extremely solid, and it couldn't be dispersed by information from all over the world in a short period of time. It assisted her in stabilizing her consciousness and gradually gathering the dissipating flux of knowledge around her body, to rebuild her body. The process began to fail because she couldn't keep up with the information of the entire world infiltrating her. Just then, in the vortex of information that was infiltrating her, various gleaming stars lit up, and the stars quickly filled the vortex. Simultaneously, the tarot cards that have become popular around the world, all lit up in correspondence to the stars, with an illusory light invisible to all, except the divine gazes. The appearance of stars around the vortex completely slowed the flow of information towards her. They also functioned as her anchor. She also felt the prayers and concerns of everyone who was close to her. She also noticed her Lord standing in the sky, watching over her and protecting her during this perilous time. All of this improved her condition, allowing her to resist the ancient will that was gradually awakening within her body. Diana reassembled her body and used her anchors to balance out the terrifying will that was surfacing in her body, seizing this brief moment of peace immediately. She floated in, surrounded by a turbulent vortex of information. When she moved her hand, all the information that had previously attempted to infiltrate her completely obeyed her will, as if she were the emperor of them all. A figure appeared in front of her, unaffected by everything around her. She noticed her Lord standing before her, holding a purple crown in his hand. With a smile, he placed the purple crown on her head in front of all. The Birth of Knowledge Emperor. Chapter 35, His Humanity. The Birth of Knowledge Emperor under the seat of Ocuses finally threw the peaceful world into disarray. Small conflicts have already occurred between the three kingdoms of Ocuses, Leodro, and Hiraburgan. Despite the fact that it did not result in all-out war as it had in the past. It will be in a matter of time. The most important thing was that troops stationed along the borders of the Solomon Empire and the Kingdom of Gods, increased exponentially following that ascension. There was even talk that the War Angel, who hadn't been seen in public for many years, had appeared in the border. This alone made many people around the world concerned about the future. 4. There was a well-known legend in the second and third epics that stated that the appearance of the War Angel of Creator in the world only signifies the coming of war. It was exaggerated to the point where it was claimed that the mere presence of the War Angel would cause strife even among the closest of all and could spark immediately conflict even among allies, who've been through hell together. Thus, making the War Angel infamous throughout the world, as even the mention of his name can cause even the bravest to cower in fear. The rumors became full-fledged and spread all over the world, causing widespread chaos on the northern continent. For many people believed, the world war was almost upon them. However, unlike in the past, the churches of gods did not maintain the order and went silent without warning, exacerbating the situation among the population and beyonders. In the end, it didn't matter if you were mortal or extraordinary, angel or demigod, they all felt the looming shadow of war over the entire continent. A man held a glass of wine on the balcony of a white Gothic castle, under a night sky filled with gleaming stars and the crimson moon. He was dressed in an all-black classic suit and trousers, with his short white hair slightly messy as usual. His iris were golden and violet, which shone slightly, giving him a mysterious and enchanting vibe that can pique any lady's interest at first sight of him. The man was drinking wine while seemingly immersing himself in the night, while behind him was the door that revealed the ongoing banquet full of laughter and chatter. Couples could be seen dancing to the music as it echoed throughout the room. Despite the chaos outside, nothing seemed to affect this place, creating a stark contrast, as if they were two different worlds. A man and woman dressed in classic robes emerged from the door, heading towards the white-haired man on the balcony. They were none other than Lucas and Diana, were on their way to meet their lord, who had unexpectedly arrived at the banquet. Lord, you could come inside?" Lucas inquired quietly, careful not to distribute his lord too abruptly. The lord's presence will add more significance to the entire banquet. Diana, who was with him, nodded in acquiescence while holding a glass of wine. She was dressed in a long dark gown, a diamond necklace with a dark ruby in the center, and a purple crown on her head. Her eyes had changed color, becoming a deep purple from blue, which gave off a mystic vibe. "Tonight is Diana's night," Ocuses retorted, his gaze fixed on the night sky. "My presence will only steal her spotlight. Don't mind me, continue with your banquet, I just came here for the wine," he went on in a light tone. Lucas nodded, not wanting to disturb his lord any longer, and turned to return inside, while Diana paused, as if she had more questions, but she walked with Lucas in the end. Ocuses' light voice echoed in Diana's mind at that precise moment. "Love is a precious thing, Diana. It's even more true for those of us who are gradually losing ourselves on the path. This may be the only light that shines through the darkness within us. Don't hesitate when the time comes, because it may be the only solace in this crazy and twisted world." Diana came to a halt in her path, her expression was hidden behind a veil of crimson darkness that had become thick and mysterious at this moment, her hands slightly clenched. Her body then relaxed suddenly and she turned to see her lord one last time, who was still staring at the night sky without looking at her. She then turned around and walked back to Lucas, holding his hands, much to his surprise. Her indifferent face, which had remained unchanged since being promoted to Archangel, finally broke as her lips turned upwards to form a smile while gazing at Lucas, under the light of the crimson moon. They entered together, as the cheers and chatter filled the ball immediately. Ocuses drank the wine, and a sigh escaped his lips as he finally turned away from the starry sky and looked at their smiling figures entering the ball. Humanity. Divinity. Love. Ocuses reflected as his thoughts grew. Despite the fact that he messed around a lot in his younger years, he never had true love in both of his lives. But, having read a plethora of romance novels, he had a good idea of how it would feel in a somewhat cliched way. It would start with euphoria and excitement at the prospect of seeing her and spending sleepless nights thinking about her. The racing heart, the way she looks at you, and, most importantly, how you feel that it's right, when you're around her. Love is an essential component of humanity, shaping us as we progress. It is precious, especially in this dark and depraved world where one may not even find it among the higher beings. Ocuses looked at them as he walked into the hall, his eyes filled with complicated emotions. Love he. As he reflected on himself, he shook his head with a wry smile. One might wonder why he is always partaking in mortal activities such as drinking and attending this banquet. This may have appeared to be the result of his humanity, but things had changed now. This was done solely to preserve what little humanity he had left. Simple things can sometimes be the most helpful. When one attains divinity, they are liberated from the majority of human needs. As one progresses closer to becoming an angel, they may achieve semi-immortality. But, during each step, they also lose something about their previous selves, and in the end, some completely abandon humanity, for they might go insane in despair, seeing everything they loved and remembered fade away in the tides of time, but they would always remain unchanged. Ocuses took a deep breath to calm himself. The past days had not been anything but peaceful for him, despite the fact that everything appeared to be going according to his whim and plan. He took control of hermit uniqueness to a large extent, as his plan succeeded, and the control was only strengthened further when Inez personally took his cards, despite the fact that he did a lot of subtle manipulation here and there, which she probably noticed. But it didn't matter in the end because as he got what he wanted, he became stronger. Nothing in this world, however, was free. As he took control of hermit uniqueness, the will of the oldest one, which was weakening within him at a rapid pace, completely slowed down. He also felt his humanity. Ocuses didn't regret it though, as he knew this would happen from the start and still went ahead with it, after he thought of his future. He drank all of his wine as his thoughts raced through his mind. Ocuses finally turned to face the darkness in the balcony corner and asked, finally a genuine smile dawned on his lips. Don't you think they're perfect for each other, Blaze? With a glance, he indicated Diana and Lucas in the ballroom. With his voice, a figure emerged out of the darkness, accompanied by two black wings. He had a chiseled face and shoulder-length wavy black hair. He was dressed in a silver suit with matching trousers. He also had deep blue eyes that were always indifferent. The Angel of Miracles Blaze Larson. Chapter 36, Blaze Larson. My lord. Blaze said, immediately after arriving. Under the crimson moonlight, Ocuses looked at his Angel of Miracles in silence. Blaze Larson, the Angel of Miracles, was famous throughout the world. The bards themselves travel across nations to sing his praises. There were various legends about him throughout the world. Some tell of his tales of slaying mighty dragons and to saving an entire country from the demoness for only 5 coins from a little girl. He was also heralded as the messenger of the sun god himself, and many consider his will to be the command of the sun god himself at times. In the third epoch, the low-sequence pathway formulas were widely circulated. It wasn't difficult to become extraordinary during that times. Blaze was a vagrant and part-time thief. Throughout his childhood, he learned many tricks and methods for becoming successful in his job and surviving in that era without losing his life in the hands of extraordinary people. Regardless of his profession, he would go out of his way to help others in need if asked, for a price, of course. Because of the connections he made in his teenager years, he was given the opportunity to become a Beyonder. He had several options, ranging from the well-known Sun and Tyrant pathways to the revered Paragon pathway. Yet, he chose the Fool path, and when others found out, they mocked him for being a literal fool. But Blaze was unconcerned about what others thought of him. To be honest, he preferred the error path because it was more suitable for him, but the potion formula for that is even more difficult to find. He didn't know if he'd get another chance, so he chose the Fool path without hesitation, as he knew that it was adjacent to error. During the third epoch, the most infamous paths were the error, Fool, and Door. The rumors about it became so widespread, that it was given a special name to represent it, the Cursed Pathways. They called it that because most who walked these paths would face the damned fate before becoming demigods. However, Blaze still chose this path, and his life was forever changed as a result. He didn't abandon his thieving career even after becoming a well-known diviner among mortals. When he advanced further, he even started his own circus. His life was not without adversity. Like any Beyonder of the Mysteries pathways, he was on the verge of losing control on numerous occasions. However, he pushed through it all and survived by sheer willpower at times. His desire for power, however, did not dim when he couldn't obtain the formulas for promotion, because he had witnessed and lived in the dark, cruel world long enough to understand the importance of power. That's when he decided to try his luck and join the regiment of the King of Angels, who were actually recruiting for some competent Beyonders. Blaze knew that if he wanted to advance on his path, this was the best way, as the King of Angels served the Creator himself. It would be easy for him to find about the potion formula there, even though he disliked being restricted because of how he lived. But, he knew he had to make some sacrifices. He didn't think they'd accept someone like him after learning that recruitment was for the Legion under the White Angel. He didn't have anything in common with those who were regarded as the most noble and respected at the time. But, much to his surprise, he was accepted by them after they learned about his path and past, which wasn't difficult for them to discover. Blaze expected to be a misfit, and this time his expectations were not disappointed. He was alone during his endeavors and mission, which he performed in order to increase his contribution and directly redeem for the potion. That's when he met another misfit like himself on a group mission he reluctantly accepted. Diana Knight was her name. She referred to herself as a researcher of truth and even boasted to him about knowing the White Angel and the Angel of Destiny themselves. Even though he didn't believe at first, he noticed her noble temperament and assumed she'd be a burden who only knows how to talk. When he saw the same noble woman tearing apart a mountain-sized giant in a single move, he realized how wrong he was. They hit it off right away and became friends, or so she labeled our relationship. Because of his past experiences, he never trusted anyone and wore various masks to not reveal his true self. Nonetheless, he felt this will be different in some way. However, this was also the time when he was confronted with a challenging choice for the second time in his life, the promotion to demigod. He was already considered a miracle on the Legion of Light they called the Legion of White Angel, just that for being able to advance to this stage without the assistance of anyone else. Blaze was aware of the extreme danger, but he also didn't understand why this path of mystery was so different from others. But he didn't give up and decided to apply for assistance during this promotion and ritual. He put on a spectacular show, slaying a demigod dragon in front of a large crowd of legionnaires. However, he didn't expect someone to appear right before him, before he could drink his potion. A man with white angel wings and a golden burning eye stood before him. At the time, Blaze had a subconscious feeling that the arrival of the angel would completely change his life. Ocuses was the one who arrived at the time, and he was intrigued by someone who had made it this far down the fool's path. At the time, he obtained this information from Diana. He was honestly surprised when the once thief successfully promoted himself to demigod of the fool pathway in his presence. As the will of celestial worthy was so strong at the time that the ancient sun god himself did not want the pathways to spread. However, this thief far exceeded many people's expectations, which greatly impressed him. He ordered Blaze to be assigned to a special unit directly under him. Blaze advanced with his assistance, and he became his messenger after proving himself worthy. Only after the will of celestial worthy weakened did he finally advance to the angel at the start of the fourth epoch. The angel of miracles was thus born, and while many referred to him as the kindest, he was far from it. He walked around the world with many different faces, leaving various legends behind. Even though he had never trusted others before, but the passing of centuries changed him. He finally found his own place with the people he cared about, a place he could call home at the end of the day. Blaze then looked at Diana and Lucas in the banquet and said, "They are indeed perfect for each other." His voice was rather a little low. Ocuses raised his brow. "Your rivalry with Lucas should not be over." "No, my lord." Blaze shook his head vigorously, attempting to deny it. "It was just, I didn't expect anything like this between them." He had seen a lot in his life and knew how rare this was, especially when it happened to his friends, which come as quite a shocker to him. "But I am genuinely happy for them," he said, smiling as he looked at them. Ocuses hummed and inquired, "How was the Solomon Empire?" "Strange." Blaze paused, his face solemn. "Freaky. Thrilling. Dangerous." Ocuses was unsurprised and asked indifferently, who was the first to give in. "Trunso est, my lord." Blaze felt strange when he heard the tone of the lord, but he still continued. Ocuses sighed suddenly as he turned to face him and said, "Are you still awaiting me to call you out? I expected you to be as daring as before." Blaze's eyes widened as tampered and erased memories surfaced simultaneously, but before he could process them, everything went dark for him. Ocuses looked at Blaze indifferently, who had completely changed his demeanor at the time. Blaze took out a monocle and placed it over his right eye, spoke in a voice that didn't belong to him. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Ocuses. Chapter 37, Plan of Ocuses. "What brings you to my kingdom, Amun?" Ocuses asked the Creator's son, as if he was completely clueless. Under the crimson moonlight that illuminated the balcony, instead of the Angel of Miracles, a young man with pointed hat and monocle over his right eye stood in the angel's place. He was leaning on a pillar of the balcony, with a smile, as he gazed at Ocuses. "Would you believe me if I told you I was only here for the banquet? Also, to tell congrats to the little girl who was promoted to Archangel." Amun approached him, stood in front of him, and smiled before speaking. Despite the fact that he was faced with a literal god, he showed no respect or even a change. Ocuses stared at the Angel of Time in silence before asking unexpectedly, "So, why don't we to the banquet? I also need to get some more wine, and Diana would be overjoyed to hear about your arrival." "That would be brilliant." Despite his previous words, Amun said with a smile. "Come on, Amun." Ocuses invited Amun with a gesture of his hands as he moved forward. Amun nodded and walked behind him, but his smile faded for a brief moment. Ocuses' lips turned upwards to form a smile at the same time. The blinding light of the chandelier sparkled on them as they entered through the door, and a cacophony of noises echoed. It became clearer, as chatters and laughter brimmed entire hall. Ladies and gentlemen danced in the center to classic music, while others watched and chatted alone. In the midst of it all, Lucas and Diana danced, with smiles on their faces, drawing everyone's attention. "Would you like one, Amun?" Ocuses inquired as he took 2 glasses of wine from the table and held one out to him. Amun nodded and accepted it, his intrigued gaze drawn to the entire banquet. Like a spectator. Despite this, no one had noticed them since their arrival. Don't you think the entire banquet is very interesting? Amun finally broke the silence while standing at the corner of banquet room, with a full view of everything in front of them. What gives you that impression? Ocuses said, his brows raised. It's just that everyone who here to the banquet. With a chuckle, Amun said. They are desperately trying to hold on to who they were, fearful of losing their last bits of humanity, yet they are walking down a path that could turn them into anything but human, without hesitation or doubt. Humans are so contradictory and entertaining. He concluded in a light-hearted voice. Ocuses looked around the banquet, which was filled with demigods, saints, and even angels. Despite the fact that most of them were smiling, their eyes were indifferent. While the dances appeared to be perfect and unique, they lacked vibrancy. There were also those who did not bother to hide behind masks like others. They are certainly contradictory. With a chuckle, Ocuses said. However, there is more to them than it could ever meet your eye. He took a pause. Let's not get into it, you could perhaps meet Diana after she finishes the dance. I could show you around until then if you want. No, it's fine. Amun was considerate and ignored Ocuses' comment about him, and his expression finally changed. Honesty, I wasn't expecting such hospitality from you when I decided to come and meet you. Do you expect the literal sun to shine on you? Ocuses said with a smile. Only just about, Amun said, nodding. You are far better to the other 2. They don't even think twice before striking me at first sight. And, even when I was a kid, I liked you as my teacher over the other 2. I can't say the same thing, though. Ocuses said, his smile widening. Adam was much better. Amun's smile froze, but he quickly recovered his composure. I never expected to hear that from you, Ocuses, Amun says. You indeed have changed a lot. Amun continued after noticing his silence. I was genuinely surprised when I learned about your plan. I must say, it is a fantastic plan. Trunsoest and Alitza have succumbed completely to your calculations. With their betrayal, the rest of the nobles will soon follow, and the entire Solomon Empire will crumble when you and the other gods lay siege. He said this while adjusting his monocle and approaching him. You should also be aware of the risky factors that exist within the Solomon Empire. Nonetheless, you sent your angel to the empire without hesitation, which had many kings of angels and 2 gods. Whether you truly didn't care about your angel and plans, or you were always aware that he would pique my interest from the start, considering those 2 live not far away from me. He was referring to the law of beyonder characteristics convergence, which is very strong between the 3 pathways of mysteries at this era. The plan was always bound to be revealed to me, and knowing my character, you wanted to involve me in this, from the start to ensure its success. Amun still smiled, and he showed no resentment at being used. He watched Ocuses' expression with interest, but he was let down from his expectations. Ocuses' expression has now become indifferent. Wasn't that an excellent analysis? He clapped, but his tone was completely apathetic. But you missed something, I even knew you'd come here to confront me. Amun didn't show any panic at his words. As I thought, I already had a guess, when I met you in the balcony. You really anticipated everything, Ocuses. He stood in front of Ocuses, looking at the gods in different eyes with no fear or panic, and his smile didn't fade in the least. This is so different from who you were before, Ocuses. Even though, divinity and time can cause significant changes in a person. But your state reminded me of my zealot brother's change after our father died at your hands. Amun said. Ocuses' expression became amusing as he looked at the Angel of Time. He didn't seem to be moved by Amun's words in the least. I have to say, you are the most daring person I have ever seen. He chuckled. You are also far from reckless, despite appearances. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here facing me with just an avatar, as your true body is in the Solomon Empire, which is protected under authority of Solomon and Sasrar. But, you made an error, Amun. Ocuses' eyes became completely purple, which had not been visible to others until now. A vast and terrifying divine aura erupted from him, morphing into a purple eye without eyelashes above his figure. Amun's smile froze when he saw the purple eye. The Hermit. Chapter 38, Gungnir. You are stunning, Diana. Lucas smiled as he danced around the room, holding her hands and hip. However, I can't say the same. Diana mocked him, but her smile brightened as she kept up with Lucas perfectly. Ow! After hearing this, Lucas gave Diana a painful look that Diana thought was really phony. You really are something, aren't you? Diana whispered at his ear. You aren't even trying to hide. Lucas became serious, he was somewhat determined to seize this opportunity. But he was interrupted, and for a brief moment, Lucas didn't know how to feel. He had a strong suspicion that the goddess of doom was keeping an eye on him. She came to a halt in the middle of the dance, causing him to come to a halt as well. As she looked over the edge of the banquet, her expression was frozen. What happened? Lucas inquired, clutching her shoulder, having noticed her fearful expression. The music ceased. The guests turned to look at them, seeing the situation. It is him. He is here, along with the Lord. Diana's voice was slightly hoarse as horrible memories that she didn't want to recall flashed through her mind. Before Lucas could ask any more questions, a terrifying divine aura swept the entire banquet hall unrestrainedly. Everyone was frozen, some in complete terror and horror, while others couldn't take the repression and froze under the pressure. But they all had one thing in common, they all kept their heads down instinctively in their posture. Don't look, moron! Diana covered the eyes of Lucas, who could still move under this aura and was trying to see, as the divine aura didn't affect them that much. Despite the fact that the divine aura had no effect on the surroundings, their lord's authority was no longer restrained. Looking at their lord now, anyone below the rank of King of Angels will be instantly burned to ashes. Who exactly is he? Lucas finally asked with difficulty, under the divine aura. It's the Angel of Time, or, more accurately, him, the god of mischief. Diana's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. In the edge of banquet hall. I already have what I wanted, Amen. Ocuses spoke with a smirk while holding a brown book, which Blaze had obtained from Trunsoest. Everything is already in motion, the tide of times will soon sweep the Solomon Empire into history, ushering in a new era, under my plans. Ocuses approached Amen, looking down and raising his right hand. He used the authority of knowledge, giving some of the knowledge he knew power. More importantly, it was the myths. A golden spear appeared in his hand. With just the appearance of a golden spear in his hand, a phantom of a tree with 9 galaxies formed behind the golden spear. Gungnir, the legendary spear. The phantom of the tree, however, was invisible to all under Osus's control, concealing the identity of the spear and myth from the prying eyes. Amen was not in the mood to think about how the book ended up in the hands of the Ocuses because the spear screamed danger to him. He had a feeling that if he was targeted by the golden spear, he wouldn't be able to escape it all, no amount of deceit or even time would be enough save him. But, Amen, will you live to see the new era? While golden pure light fell on Amen's figure, melting him, Ocuses asked with a smile. Let's find out, shall we? It's truly. Despite his circumstances, Amen still wanted to speak up. Even if it was known to your true body, it's pointless. Ocuses interrupted his attempts. The timing couldn't be better. So, consider this a declaration. He paused and looked at the direction of Solomon Empire, then he continued with a grin. A declaration of war. Ocuses threw the spear with all his might in the direction of the Solomon Empire. The spear immediately blazed in its path before disappearing from sight. In the night sky above the northern continent, a blazing shooting star appeared, the terrifying light that erupted from it, left a trail of light that almost illuminated the sky in its paths. The stars in the night sky were completely dimmed by the illumination of light, and the sky was completely brightened, as if the sun itself had descended on the world. Gungnir descended from the sky with such force that it ripped apart everything in its path. The very northern continent began to tremble under the mighty force that had not yet descended, as various earthquakes erupted around. Gungnir finally made its way into the Solomon Empire, rupturing the very reality in its path. Boom! 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 The distorted rules woven into the fabric of reality also broke with it. Even though the legendary spear was extremely powerful, it only affected what was in its path under the control of Osuses, causing no collateral damage, otherwise, the entire northern continent would have been destroyed by its mere descent. Ocuses, you dare! A majestic voice rang out, echoing throughout the Solomon Empire. Immediately, a twisted world descended around the spear, attempting to contain the mighty spear itself. A majestic yet twisted city stood in the middle of the distorted world, where reality was completely black and white. Every building in the city was asymmetrical in design, and citizens wandered aimlessly through it, The most important thing was that there was a black sun in the middle of the sky. The golden spear trembled, as if enraged, and began emitting blazing light that immediately shone on the entire twisted world, dissolving all the distorted rules that were attempting to act on it. The spear buzzed as its power surged, and before Solomon could do anything else, the entire reality of twisted world shattered like shards of mirror, seemingly unable to bear the power of the spear anymore. The golden spear resumed its path to its target, seemingly unstoppable by anything in the world. Gungnir flew towards a range of mountains, where various Gothic castles was present along the mountain range. Amun stood on the mountain's edge, facing the golden spear that was coming for his life. His authority was completely useless against the spear. He had not anticipated the situation becoming so dire that his life was in danger. He knew he had no chance against the spear. Even fleeing wouldn't work because he felt the spear had locked him and would not let go until it took his life. He finally sighed and shouted, "Adam!" Immediately, a ring of pitch-black columns rose around him, forming an ancient cathedral that completely protected Amun within. It didn't stop there. A phantom of being nailed in an inverted cross appeared above the bone cathedral, followed by a black, sticky and depraved ocean that encircled the cathedral. As the spear blazed towards the cathedral, the black ocean surged as waves filled with degeneration's authority rushed towards the spear in an attempt to corrupt it. The spear buzzed again and continued unaffected through the black ocean. Then it slammed into the bone cathedral with all its might. Crack! A sound was heard all over the world. As various cracks appeared all over the bone cathedral, seemingly unable to withstand the power of the spear. However, a powerful force from the hanged man's phantom descended onto the cathedral, causing the cracks to heal before the cathedral could collapse. Then there was a stalemate between the spear and the hanged man, as to whose power triumphed over the other. The spear continued to exert his power on the cathedral, but it couldn't break it due to the hanged man. The power of the hanged man could not affect the spear, it could only keep the cathedral from collapsing. The spear, on the other hand, trembled violently before emitting a scorching light, in hopes breaking the deadlock. Boom! The golden spear exploded in a mass of light, expanding and disintegrating everything in its path like a dazzling sun. The surrounding mountain range instantly disintegrated as the light expanded. However, the space was distorted visibly around the entire place, in order to separate it from reality, thus prevent further destruction from spreading. The phantom of the hanged man also expanded and completely covered the bone cathedral within it. A black ocean manifested from the authority of degeneration appeared before the dazzling sun and completely covered the sun within. The sun brightened and melted the black ocean, but it also dimmed immediately afterwards, beneath the black ocean's waves. The golden sun and the black ocean both disappeared after long fight, leaving only the ruins and bone cathedral. Chapter 39, End of the Night. In the bone cathedral, Adam stood up from his praying position and looked out the window. The distorted space, which appeared to be like a curtain, vanished, as did the phantom of the hanged man above. He turned to face Amun, who sat in one of the church chairs. The law of causality. Adam stated softly. There was such a law in the spear. Even though, he found some concealment on the spear, which prevented him from probing any further. Adam said nothing about it. With hermit uniqueness, Ocuses accomplished a lot. While walking towards the Amun, Adam said, even if an actual hermit ascends, his achievements may not be surpassed. He genuinely praised Ocuses. After everything that has happened, this comes as no surprise to me. After hearing his praise for Ocuses, Amun said. His demeanor had not changed, despite the fact that he was almost in the embrace of death. You are underestimating. Adam spoke softly. The gods. Amun stood up from his seat, ignoring his previous words, then asked. Is Solomon coming for me? Yes. Adam nodded. Solomon had already noticed problems in his kingdom, but he couldn't pinpoint them. As a result, his suspicions were directed only at those who could keep them hidden from him. He's already convinced that it is you, given what happened now, and his knowledge of you and the gods. You never escaped the calculations of Ocuses, Amun. Adam said everything in a gentle tone. Amun sighed and moved his gaze to the cathedral's exit. Are you leaving? Despite his expectation, Adam inquired. Yes, at least until everything settles. Amun said this without turning to face him. Despite the fact that I would have preferred to stay for the impending chaos. The six gods, on the other hand, would not be pleased about that. As for Solomon, the six gods will soon decide his fate. After noticing his brother's silence, Amun moved towards the entrance. Just when he was about to exit the cathedral, Adam's gentle voice was heard. This is the last time, Amun, I would assist you in this manner against him. Amun could sense the clear indifference in his gentle voice. My zealot brother. With him against you, your path and goals will be far from easy to achieve, as you previously imagined, Amun stated with a chuckle. Then, Amun left without waiting for his brother's response. _________________________________________ Alia's Kingdom, Northern Continent. As expected. Muttered Ocuses, apathetically. He knew he was going to miss his shot from the start. However, this was more of a declaration, as well as a move to expose Amun in front of Solomon. When it comes to dealing with Solomon and the true creator, as well as their army, which includes, most notably, Medici and Ouroboros, all of the gods and their forces will be required. Adding Amun to the mix would only make the situation more chaotic. Killing a god has never been easy. At the very least, this will force Amun to flee the Solomon Empire. But, there is still one, I haven't entirely considered yet. Ocuses reflected as he drank the wine. Bethel Abraham. Actually, there was a reason he left this king of angels out of his plans. Bethel's place in the empire is ambiguous, he didn't vow allegiance to either the true creator or Solomon. And, more crucially, Solomon could do nothing about it since Bethel, in his own right and power, could talk to a deity equally. Even most gods wouldn't be able to stop Bethel if he decided to flee during a chaotic conflict. Ocuses could only sigh at the conveyance of the door pathway. Bethel also has another lethal move at his disposal, teleporting his opponent to the cosmos, where the outer gods are present. This makes him a greater threat if he ever decides to support Solomon, to the point that even the gods themselves must personally besiege him. Ocuses massaged his temples, it not that he hadn't thought about Bethel before. However, even he has restrictions to how much he can move in the Solomon Empire. Let's put the matter of Bethel on hold until the rest of them convenes. With a sigh, Ocuses pondered. Finally, Adam. He has no idea where Adam would stand in the midst of the coming chaos, but one thing is certain, it is not with Solomon. But, given who Adam is, he isn't going to risk anything. He would not hesitate to descend personally to face Adam if the situation became out of hand. Ocuses had a reasonable expectation that he would encounter Adam in the upcoming war. Especially because of the Groseal travels that he had assigned to Lucas to retrieve. He didn't forget about that book, for sure. If the book is what he thinks it is, he and Adam will have to confront each other at some point during the war. Ocuses drank all of the wine and put his mixed thoughts aside, and when he raised his hands, golden flames burst, forming a phoenix. Go! He let the phoenix fly to the sky, from the balcony where he now stood. The phoenix spread its wings and started flying towards the kingdom of Ammon-Isis. Ocuses eventually turned to face his angels, who stood silently in the balcony behind him. The banquet that was supposed to take place behind the door had already been taken, and everyone had already fled, leaving the entire hall behind the door forlorn and empty. After everything that had happened up to this point, there was only Diana and Lucas, who were both very nervous at the moment. Did Blaze wake up? The silence was finally broken by Ocuses. "Milord, no. He is still asleep and under your light, the worm of time in him has already been destroyed." Lucas was the first to speak up and informed of the situation. Ocuses didn't seem surprised when he nodded. Because, Blaze was an angel under his command, Amun didn't dare to steal his identity. He had only parasitized Blaze to meet with him. "The gods will gather in my kingdom soon," Ocuses stated. "Their angels will mostly be following them, so make sure everything is in order." Diana and Lucas nodded in agreement as they heard their lord, their nervousness diminishing meanwhile. They didn't dare to ask any questions after noticing their lord's mood and not wanting to upset him, after everything that happened. Finally, "Get ready for war." His serene words reverberated through the air as his figure disintegrated into golden particles that dispersed in the breeze. The rising sun could be seen through the horizon, signaling the end of a historic night. Chapter 40, Their Arrival. Northern Continent, Alia's Kingdom. A young boy with silver hair sat on a bench in the capital's now deserted streets. He was having relish with a dollop of ice cream from a glass cup. At the same time, the boy was enthralled staring up at the sky. The sky was bright, not as bright as it had been with the sun, but it had a twilight tone to it. The sky was a mix of orange, red, and blue hues, mesmerizing yet deadly, for anyone who looked at it felt weakness emerge within them spontaneously, to the point where even moving their hands and legs beneath the sky would be difficult, until they withered away and returned to earth. However, no one except the boy was present to witness this dazzling spectacle, as the once prosperous city had been completely deserted except for some patrolling demigods and saints on the outskirts of the city, who did not dare to stare at the sky like the boy. The shops were completely closed, with signs stating that they would be closed for an indefinite period of time. The roads were desolate, with some empty or abandoned carriages parked on the side of the road. The streets, which were previously filled with cacophony of noises, were now completely silent. A newspaper with headlines written in large fonts was lying on the bench where the boy sat. The declaration of war: the kingdom of Alias declares war on the Solomon Empire. A state of emergency has been implemented in Alias kingdom, as well as the other 5 kingdoms. The silver-haired boy finally put the ice cream down and murmured, his gaze still fixed on the twilight sky. Gods always like to be grand, don't they, Diana? Will? A stern voice echoed, rather deafeningly, due to the silence around. It's always a pleasure to hear your divine voice. Will Osepton said, but his face was visibly cringing. A woman in blue traditional robes appeared not far from the bench, wearing golden-rimmed glasses over her deep purple eyes. Her mere presence made the air thicken and mysterious. Diana, Angel of Wisdom. Diana ignored his remarks and opened a golden parchment. Then, she read the contents aloud. Will Osepton is required to participate in the coming war by the order of Eternal Blazing Sunday. Will sighed, as he heard the order. But, before he could say anything, he and Diana noticed something in their perception. Plants and trees in the city began to grow abnormally, absorbing nutrients from unknown sources. The tree began to grow long and roots erupted from the ground, as various plants began to sprout from the very roots. Flowers bloomed in a range of colors on the planets, ranging from white to even dark brown. When viewed from above, the entire city appeared brilliant, as if it were literally blanketed in a kaleidoscope of colors. Roar! A roar echoed, as a majestic lion appeared in the desolate streets of the capital, followed by various other animals, marching wherever the plants and trees began to grow taller. It was as if they were following someone. A natural paradise. Diana felt no other description fit this. It also made her yearn for the power of God. The entire change around her was most likely caused by Earth Mother passing by. She couldn't imagine what it would be like if Earth Mother asserted her authority. Diana looked around, and only the bench and the area around her were unaffected by the ever-growing trees and plants. Then, she was perplexed when she saw Will, who was still trying to protect his freaking ice cream despite everything that was going on around them. But, she immediately looked at the ground, not daring to move because she sensed a divine presence in the sky. Even though she yearned for godly power, she did not abandon her fear of gods. She was well aware that not all gods are as kind as her lord. She also didn't have to think to figure out who it was in the sky. Earth Mother. However, she caught a glimpse of Will out of the corner of her eye, then her eyes widened. Will looked up at the sky and noticed a divine woman appear with a flash of green light. She was dressed in a white gown that was embroidered with images of herbs and plants. Earth Mother appeared to sense his gaze and stared down at him from the sky. Will didn't even flinch when she looked at him, and he immediately waved his hands at her with a cheerful smile on his face, as if he was nothing more than a curious kid. When Earth Mother saw this, she smiled and waved back to him from the sky before disappearing. The divine presence also receded and moved towards the nearby Ontal Mountains. You're really getting into your role. Diana was stunned, she couldn't believe what had just happened. Others described her as courageous, and when compared to the kid before her, she was literally nothing. Even though she didn't see how Earth Mother reacted, she could make a guess based on Will's still intact and cheerful demeanor. All gods aren't frightening, especially Earth Mother, who was rumored to be the kindest of all. Will smiled as he noticed her expression. You should know better than to believe these rumors. Diana abruptly paused as she realized how she was advising him, which really looked like adults advising children, under his manipulation. Will's smile brightened as he saw Diana's realization. This situation is not simple, for it is an important part of his acting. You know what, this is not important anymore. I'm here to inform you that you will be needed at the headquarters immediately, where the briefing for war will soon begin. The gods are arriving one by one, and all of the angels are gathering there. You are not permitted to roam around here, regardless of your unique situation. Diana sighed, finally calming down, and didn't bother to say anything else to Will, before diving right into the topic. I really can't escape. Will said, his face sad. Nothing comes without a price, Will. You should be more knowledgeable about this than I am. You've had the sanctuary of the 6 gods up to this point, thus you didn't have to worry about the true creator or the angel of fate under him. Diana said solemnly. Will's childish expression faded, and he said with a sigh. Fine. But wait a minute, Diana. I'll take the ice cream. Will said, as he wanted to take the ice cream from the bench. Boom. Just then, thunder roared in the sky, quaking the entire city. No. Will shouted. My ice cream. Boom. As the twilight faded and dark clouds covered the entire sky, thunder boomed once more in the sky. However, the golden light of the sun shone through the dark clouds, dispersing the most of the dark clouds in the sky. As if enraged by the sun's light, streaks of blue lightning began to flash in the remaining clouds. Idiot! Diana yelled at Will, as she was trying to keep her balance against the oppressive pressure from above. She didn't hesitate to take the tragic Will's hand with hers. Their figures became illusory and soon vanished from the streets. A/N, I just want to respond to some comments and questions from here and other websites. 1. How could Ocuses teleport despite the fact that he has no connection to the door pathway? I'd like to point out that Ocuses is a god. Klein could even phase through flames when he was only a magician. So, what stops Ocuses from teleporting through the literal sunlight? 2. When Klein searches for it, the miracle invoker characteristic are already transformed into sealed artifact within the Church of Ocuses, so how did Ocuses obtain the second miracle invoker characteristic for Blaze? What a silly question! It's simple logic. Blaze became an angel by utilizing that characteristic, there was no second one. Also, I'd like to point out that my fanfiction is far from perfect, and I'm making the entire story from the 4th epoch, which only contains facts in the original story. I'm making up the rest of it with my imagination, so there will obviously be some inconsistencies with original book, which you can point out if you find them. But if you want a perfect story, I am far from capable, because I am not a professional writer. Chapter 41, Lilith and Bladheel. Northern continent, on tall mountains. A illusory golden door soared above the mountain range's highest peak, emitting an endless radiance. The radiance completely engulfed the entrance to the divine kingdom, transforming it into a vast expanse of light. Within the light, however, a shadow of an illusory castle was visible. The door had a mythical and gentle feel to it, making anyone yearn for the eternal paradise that lay within. This is the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun, which was separated from the real world by this illusory golden door. A white castle perched on the crest of a mountain in the divine kingdom, with a lake in front and vast flights of white flowers all around. In a room within the castle, 2 divine figures sat on a long silver table with 6 chairs, 2 at the head and foot of the table and 2 on each side. How can you expect me to believe Amon Ines? A giant grumbled to the white-haired man in the main seat from one of the silver chairs on the side. You should be aware, she has a way with pesky plots and tricks. And we could never anticipate it until it was too late. You don't have to be concerned about that. The white-haired man said casually. I'll take care of her concealment. His purple eyes sharpened, as if it could pry through all mysteries and secrets. And Amon Isis should be well aware of the situation we're facing. You don't have to be concerned about her backstab. He chuckled and stated the obvious. The hermit, the twilight giant, sighed as he caught a sight of the purple eyes, and while he was relieved, he continued to inquire. Without appropriate evidence, Ocuses, this alliance you're planning will fall apart. It's not a problem for me to believe you and take your word for it. Your brothers, on the other hand, will not be the same. The word brothers was emphasized by the twilight giant. I don't want a full-fledged war to erupt right now. The giant asserted, knowing that if those 3 could not find common ground now, he is certain that war would erupt between them. The other gods will be forced to choose sides at the time, and everything will regress into chaos. They cannot afford chaos, which is also what Solomon wishes to see the most. Amun never disappoints, Badiel. Ocuses smiled as he took a bronze book from nowhere and placed it on the table. Did you really aim at Amun? Badiel inquired, sitting up straight and his attention completely focused on this subject. He did, however, cast a glance at the book, before asking. He noticed the spear piercing the atmosphere and heading towards the Solomon Empire, since the entire sky was illuminated by light and the spear was like the sun descending on the world. However, he was unaware of the outcome because it occurred within the Solomon Empire. He could also deduce from Ocuses' words that the book was obtained through Amun, who Ocuses most likely used as pawn in his plans. Which really surprised Badiel because he didn't expect Ocuses to become such a scheming guy. The resemblance of White Angel in his memory was completely gone, when he saw Ocuses now. Ocuses gave a nod. So, what happened? Badil immediately inquired. What do you anticipate? Ocuses stated as he rose from his seat. He pulled the same card like when he was a kid, and his daddy arrived just in time to save him. What? Badil questioned, his face blank, as if he didn't understand what he was saying. Ocuses sighed, and didn't want to bother any more. He was standing in front of the door, staring at it. Your mother is also here, perhaps you could ask her. Without turning back to face Badil, he said with a chuckle. Creak. Lilith entered the room with a gentle smile as the large white door to the room opened. Honesty. Ocuses took a deep breath, his heart racing. How the hell is she that beautiful? It didn't change now, seeing her still made him restless in his heart even as a god, with divinity. Her beauty is certainly superior to even those jade beauties depicted so clearly in Chinese cultivation novels. Why was he so certain? When one considers Lilith's past, she can also be considered the personification of beauty itself. Her beauty could not even be expressed in words. Ocuses. Lilith smiled as she looked at him. When Ocuses looked at her, he could tell she had changed, which is rare for a god. But, given what had occurred, this came as no surprise to him. Her eyes, which had previously been calm and serene, now had a vibrancy to them, and her smile had a genuine feeling to it. Ocuses complimented her with a smile. You look stunning. When Lilith heard that, she raised her brows in intrigue. But, she didn't reply, because there was still another person in the room. Mother. Badil said in low voice, his eyes darting sideways. Oh. Ocuses' heart was intrigued, and he wished he had his wine to watch this drama unfold. Badil, hasn't it been a long time? Lilith spoke gently, her eyes filled with concern, just like a real mother. Yes, mother. Badil said, still not looking at Lilith, in an awkward tone. How have you been lately? Did Lilith stage some kind of fallout with Badil? As the strange atmosphere filled the entire room, Ocuses thought. But his reaction is simply. It's been really good. Lilith said calmly. If you don't include the fact that I almost died the other day, it's all good. Just as the atmosphere became increasingly strange. Boom. The sound of thunder booming attracted everyone's attention. Ocuses' eyes glowed as he observed everything going on outside through the light of Sunday. The entire sky of Alia's kingdom was covered in black clouds, with blue lightning flashing in it. This was a direct challenge to his authority. Whether it was Lilith or Badil, they restrained their power, thus only affecting the area around them. I'm needed there. Ocuses addressed two of them. He is here. Wait a second, Ocuses. Badil got out of his chair. I'll also come. He moved swiftly, as if he didn't want to be here anymore. And how about you? Ocuses asked Lilith. I'm fine right here. Lilith stated as she looked around the castle. Don't fight with him and try to find common ground. Ocuses nodded and turned to face Badil, who had a relieved look on his face for a brief moment. But it didn't escape his sharp eyes. All right, let's go. He said to Badil, and stopped paying attention to them, for he was about to face his sworn brother for the first time in a long while. They both vanished in a flash of light that illuminated the surroundings brightly. Under the light of the sun, Ocuses and Badil appeared in the sky filled with dark clouds. Oh, Ocuses, you're finally willing to show up. An scornful voice thundered through the black clouds as the blue lightning began to gather. The voice continued without giving him the opportunity to respond. I was surprised to learn that it was you who wanted to start the alliance in the first place. It's very unlike you. It appears that the times have done wonders for the once proud White Angel, the vanity? Arrogance? Everything seems to have vanished when I look at you now. Chapter 42, Tyrant. Capital, Alia's Kingdom, Northern Continent. Ocuses said. I can't say the same for you though, it appears you're still the same musclehead like you were back then. He had a mocking smile, while speaking. As if enraged by his remarks, the lightning in the dark clouds began flashing at a rapid rate. Boom. Then, a bolt of lightning roared out of the dark clouds at Ocuses, carrying the power to destroy the very earth itself, while lighting up the surroundings. As his expression became solemn, Badil took his sword, which was bathed in twilight. He really shouldn't have expected much from them, Given their personalities, this should have been completely predictable. However, he raised his brows in surprise, when he saw, Oculus just stood there in the sky, surrounded by the brilliance of sun, without making any move, despite the lightning coming at him. Oculus smiled as he looked at the lightning, which possessed the power of a planet. He didn't do anything except stare at the lightning as if he knew nothing was going to happen. The lightning suddenly brightened, when it was not far from him and a figure morphed out of the light. Immediately, a tyrannical aura swept unrestrainedly, even angels gathering in the headquarters far away, felt absolute oppression on their body and soul. Many even fainted and knelt under this aura. A dignified man with blue hair and stormy eyes appeared in front of him. He was dressed in black armor, as if he'd arrived prepared to fight. The blue cloak of his armor swayed in the strong winds. He held a blue trident encrusted with lightning in his hands. Lord of Storms, Leodro. Contrarily, Leodro did not attack immediately, after appearing. It appeared that not everything had changed. You're still as sharp-tongued as you were back then. His voice thundered across the sky as he spoke majestically. Oh! Oculus stated exaggeratedly. If I am a sharp-tongued? Then, into which category will you fall? He was abruptly cut off as a divine aura swept over his figure. Leodro snorted and raised his trident, pointing at him, as lightning began to gather in it, with enough power to make starkiller beams look like firecrackers. The intention of the war is clear. You will lose. Oculus stated calmly, as if it were a matter of fact. His eyes were turning purple. Is that what gives you the confidence? Hermit. Leodro said, as his eyes gleamed with no intention of retreating. How about we find out? Isn't it been a long time since we had a friendly spar, Oculus? Oculus smiled as a white spear appeared in his hand, emitting a radiance of light. Come on. He grinned. If you want war that much, then I will grant it. Much to Leodro's great annoyance, he said magnanimously. Oculus will not back down or even try to talk him out of it. He knew Leodro well enough to know otherwise. Leodro is an absolute tyrant. Leodro had the courage to go and challenge Amon Isis for his apotheosis ritual, so the man standing before him was anything but simple. He survived under her scythe, even though Amon Ines was going easy on him. It's still a big deal for a king of angels without uniqueness to face a god. Oculus didn't want war now, but that doesn't mean he'll passively accept someone challenging his authority. Soon after, a terrifying divine aura erupted from two of them, shaking the entire world's sky. Natural disasters erupted all over the world, as if nature was at war with itself. The sky has raged with lightning storms, as if feeling the wrath of the ruler of the skies. The oceans rioted, causing massive tsunamis and submerging islands. To top it all off, a powerful earthquake struck the continents. At the same time, the golden sun in the sky, which gave life and light to the entire world, expanded and became incredibly large. It appeared as if the sun itself was falling into the world for many. The sky was divided, with one half filled with vast expanses of light and the other with storms. You all need to relax. This is exactly what Solomon wishes for. Badil attempted to calm the situation, as he saw how things were spiraling out of control. Badil, get out! Exclaimed Leodro. This is only between us, brothers. When he heard what Leodro said, Badil's eyes twitched and he felt helpless in his heart. Leodro's eyes started to glow blue, with lightning streaks erupting from the edges. He was floated in the vast expanse of black clouds, with blue lightning flashing across it. His trident was also completely illuminated by lightning. Oculus's eyes began to completely glow with light, and his casual suit burned away as golden flames swept across his body, revealing white armor beneath. He was standing in a light-filled sky, and pure light began to gather in the tip of his white spear. Everything suddenly calmed down, literally all of it went quiet. The calm didn't last long, and just like after the calm before the storm, it broke in a spectacular way, with the entire sky around the world lighting up at the same time in a mix of golden and blue hues. Oculus! Leodro exclaimed with excitement as he moved at breakneck speed towards Oculus, literally transforming into blue lightning. Leodro! Oculus also shouted with a grin, feeling long-lost excitement rekindle in his heart at the moment. He knew what was causing this, it was the thrill of battle, just pure fighting without worrying about anything. He also found it amusing that they were reenacting the famous Naruto scene to some extent. Oculus dashed towards Leodro, erupting in a blaze of pure light, transforming into a beam of light. At the same time, Badil, who was standing nearby in the sky, inserted his sword into the very space itself, then twilight erupted, mixing with golden and blue hues, forming a strange curtain that draped over the entire battlefield. Lilith appeared and stood not far from Badil, with a sigh, as she saw the situation, then various plants and trees grew on the very curtain, forming another layer over the curtain. The curtain, combined with the power of all four gods, completely prevented the battle from affecting the outside world. Boom! The reality completely collapsed in their path, as the beam of pure light and blue lightning dashed towards each other. The light in the battlefield became blinding, as even Badil and Lilith were forced to close their eyes. Just then, in the middle of the battlefield, a crimson moon rose up like a scene from the apocalypse, followed by an illusory white tower brimming with an aura of insanity and destruction. The crimson moon and white tower emitted a terrifying aura, causing pure beam of light and blue lightning to freeze in their path. The light beam collapsed into the figure of Ocuses, as the hands of a divine woman tightly pressed on his shoulder, holding him down, while also hovering behind him. The crimson moon hung behind the woman like a divine halo. She wore a long black gown adorned with countless resplendent lights. Evernight Goddess, Amon Isis. Chapter 43, Trunso Est. I take back what I said previously. Amon Ines said in an ethereal voice as she let go of his shoulder and floated beside him. You're still somewhat the same as you were back then, reckless and without any concern for consequences. Her voice remained ethereal, but with each word, the darkness thickened around her. Ocuses sighed in disappointment at the battle being interrupted. He hadn't felt this excited in a long time, since becoming a god. He can also detect anger in Amanine's tone, and while he understands why she is angry, he was still indifferent. Even though he accepted Leodro's challenge, he did not initiate this, and he also cannot sit back and watch Leodro behave like that in his kingdom. Ocuses waved his spear, causing it to shatter into light particles that swept over his figure before dissipating, revealing him in a casual black suit rather than silver armor. He started walking towards Badil and Lilith, not bothering to say anything to her. Amon Ines sighed as she observed Ocuses' indifference, then turned to face Leodro, who had gone ahead of her and Hirabergen. She specifically told him to wait, so that they wouldn't have any problems with her in the middle of them. However, looking at the situation, she felt helpless. It may appear that only the fight between Leodro and Ocuses is taking place, but Amon Ines noticed Solomon and True Creator's gazes here. She was confident that they would not pass up a golden opportunity to strike. Take your hand off my shoulders, old man. Leodro grumbled in disgust. Before he could swat the hand that was holding him down, the hand let go of his shoulder, and the figure hovering behind him also floated down. An elderly man dressed in a black hod robe. He had starry blue eyes and white beard, and he was holding a book with an omniscient eye on his other hand. Hirabergen, god of wisdom and knowledge. What more could anyone possibly expect from you two? Hirabergen spoke calmly, his gaze shifting between Ocuses and Leodro. Look at you, despite the fact that everything has devolved into complete chaos, you two are still fighting and discarding everything with little regard for the consequences. Oh, Ocuses said, turning to face Hirabergen. You should first get off the high horse, Hirabergen. He looked at the Hirabergen, who was floating slightly above, holding his book and looking down at them. Despite his calm tone, anyone could sense his condescending attitude from his words. You speak as if you are above us. Leodro said bluntly and paused for a moment as a mocking smile appeared on his lips. Then, he continued. Dragon of Betrayal. He didn't think twice about using the infamous title of Hirabergen. When Ocuses heard that name, he smirked. Hirabergen was far superior to him and Leodro, if it comes to betrayal. One of the main reasons why the Dragon of Imagination, Enkelwelt, the most powerful ancient god, died at the hands of the ancient sun god was Hirabergen's backstab of Enkelwelt at a critical moment of battle. Despite hearing his infamous title, Hirabergen appeared calm. However, his blue eyes started glowing, which were like stars in the night sky, and the divine aura that erupted from him, said otherwise. Lilith and Badil approached Ocuses and stood beside him. They maintained silence, with no intention of intervening. Enough. Amon Ines said, as darkness exploded around her figure like a tide, it swept away the remaining light and thunder, as well as the illusory white tower, and they all vanished silently within darkness. She appeared in the midst of them all and spoke, radiating an aura of terror. We're on the verge of war with Sasrar and Solomon, but you three still can't put your differences aside. There's also Badil here, can you see me and him bickering like kids? Get your things together, or let's put an end to this alliance once and for all. Leodro snorted when he heard Amon-Ines, but he still put his trident away. Hiraburgen, meanwhile, retracted his divine aura and floated downwards. Now. While walking towards Amon-Ines, Ocuses said. Given the importance of alliance, you don't have to say something like that, Amon-Ines. It was just a friendly brawl between us. He didn't think twice about labeling that fight which shook the world, as a simple spar. We were never serious, and everything before was just a way for us to greet each other. Isn't that right, Leodro, Hiraburgen? He didn't hesitate sprout bullshit to calm Amon-Ines and then, turned to look at them. He cannot afford for the alliance to fail, which it will if Amon-Ines back down. Even though he expected something like this to happen, still he became a little carried away when Leodro challenged him. After noticing his gaze, Leodro and Hiraburgen agreed with a nod. Despite the fact that Leodro was a little stiff while doing so. Amon-Ines retracted her aura and looked at them deeply, especially Leodro, who frowned. But she didn't bother any longer and said to everyone. All right, let's go. The 6 gods were finally able to gather peacefully in a room inside the White Castle. As the sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, a long silver table with 6 chairs was present in the center of the room. Ocuses sat in the front chair, while Amon-Ines sat at the foot of the table. Lilith and Badil sat in the 2 seats on the right, followed by Leodro and Hiraburgen on the left. The seating arrangement was obviously not simple. Ocuses was taking the main seat, not just for hosting this entire event, but also for making it possible, with Amon-Ines coming in second. Let's begin. Ocuses said, while raising his hand to tap on the bronze book on the table. Several ripples erupted from the bronze book and merged with reality. It caused the reality around the silver table to blur and haze, and then everything went dark. The darkness did not last long, as it was illuminated by dim light, revealing a scene of black pyramid-style mausoleums. The entire structure exuded an aura of chaos. The entire silver table floated in front of the mausoleum. Immediately, the scene changed, revealing a dimly lit room with a platform in the center and a man dressed in aristocratic attire standing before it. A brass book was present on the platform, emitting an absolute aura of order which immediately drew the attention of all gods. A man stood directly in front of the platform, with brass-colored hair and golden eyes. He had very attractive facial features and exuded a scholarly aura. The man in the projection appeared to notice the gazes of 6 gods, which were now on him and immediately bowed. Chapter 44, Justiciar Uniqueness. Yet another traitor. Those appear to be in plenty during this times. Amon-Ines said ethereally, as she gazed at Trunsoest. I think it's very wrong to label someone like that, Amon-Ines. The situation may have forced him to make this decision. Hiraburgen mused, after hearing Amon-Ines. The Solomon Empire is far from fair and filled with corruption, whereas I sense a thirst for justice and order in Trunsoest. Lilith smiled, her red eyes gleaming as she looked at Trunsoest. Interesting, such a contradiction, just like order and chaos. It's hard to expect much when the Black Emperor himself represents distortion and chaos. Badil also commented, after hearing his mother. There is a more pressing issue, Ocuses. How do you know Trunsoest was not sent here to us by Solomon himself? Leodro inquired solemnly. He was not attempting to sabotage the alliance solely because it was led by Ocuses, for he knew better given the circumstances. He was simply expressing an extremely plausible possibility. The gods all fell silent and started down at Trunsoest. Trunsoest was under immense pressure as the 6 gods' scrutinizing gazes fell on him. Even though he couldn't hear what they were saying, he could still guess that they were judging him. He finally gathered the courage to look up and face the gods. They were present in colossal silver chairs that dwarfed the platform in front of him by a huge margin. The silver chairs surrounded the platform in a U shape. The gods were obviously towering compared to him, with a white-haired man in the center chair and a black-haired lady with gauze over her face sitting in another chair right beside that white-haired man. He has an instinctive feeling that both of them were far more powerful than the other gods who sat beside them. He immediately recognized them as Eternal Blazing Sun and Evernight Goddess. Both were also infamous in the Solomon Empire, as Eternal Blazing Sun was widely regarded as a ruthless and insane heretic god, and Evernight Goddess was similarly vilified due to her authority over darkness. His Majesty really went to great lengths to smear the 6 gods. Trunsoest was also amused by how things had turned out for him, and he wanted to laugh madly, releasing his suppressed emotions, for how he was confronted with the harsh reality of Solomon's empire, which was far different from what he had expected and learned of. Trunsoest was born into a noble family that swore allegiance to Solomon long before the establishment of the Solomon Empire. He was raised with empire's beliefs, so he was terrified of heretic gods and also harbored hatred for them in his heart, while his admiration for the Black Emperor grew by day. He felt ironic, as he stood before the same heretic gods, looking back at his naive, teenage self. "I am certain," Ocuses replied whilst also placing his hand on his chin. "He's on our side." "Ocuses, can't you be more specific?" Even after hearing this, Leodro didn't let go, raising his hands to point towards Trunsoest. "He is not your average angel in the Solomon Empire. He is Solomon's direct subordinate. How can you be so certain?" "Trunsoest is on our side." Despite his fears and self-doubt about coming here, his convention did not waver in the end. As Umbella previously stated, this angel has a genuine desire for justice and order. Amon Ines finally spoke up. And he's far from being able to fool someone like Amon. Leodro was finally silenced by her words. Amon Ines was naturally aware of what had occurred, as Ocuses had informed her via the Phoenix. Ocuses finally saw their silence, after the discussion, then waved his hand to remove the order placed by him, which is what prevented Trunsoest from hearing them. This drew the attention of Trunsoest, who appeared calm and composed despite the six gods' attention on him, but his slightly trembling hands and nervous eyes completely betrayed him. "Where is Elitsa Tudor, Trunsoest?" Ocuses inquired directly, his face frowning. Trunsoest felt a sense of dread rise within him as he saw Eternal Blazing Sun's frown. The weight of the god's gaze was too much for the angel to bear, thus his body trembled. To make matters worse, he became more nervous as he thought of his majesty. "You don't have to be so worried." As a tranquil atmosphere filled the entire hall, Amonine's serene voice sounded, driving away all his nervousness and causing him to calm down. "I am concealing the entire meeting, and the order of Ocuses is also present. Solomon will be unable to find anything unless you are in front of him." She said it as if she could see right through him. Trunsoest finally took a breather after hearing that, and responded to Eternal Blazing Sun with the prepared and practiced response. "Your Excellency, Elitsa, is currently dealing with the chaos caused by your attack on the Solomon Empire. He couldn't find an appropriate time because the War Angel is with him." His eyes wandered purposefully while answering, as he didn't want to make eye contact with Eternal Blazing Sun, whom he really fears. He couldn't get the descending sun off his mind, and the sheer power that the spear carried filled him with dread. This grew stronger when he knew that both the Majesty and the true Creator took action together to stop the calamity of Sun. "Is Medici keeping an eye on Elitsa?" Ocuses said with a smirk on his lips as he considered the future. It appears Solomon finally got some brains, and begun to doubt the loyalty of his subordinates. Leodro also stated after hearing the words of Trunsoest. Despite the fact that Medici swore allegiance only to the Creator, after the formation of the Solomon Empire, he created his own division of army and integrated into the empire. So, even if Medici may disdain Solomon's orders in his heart, given the importance of the alliance between Solomon and his lord, Medici will not hesitate to follow if his lord also desires it. "It's unlikely." Badil refuted his words. "Yes, if Solomon wants to keep an eye on Elitsa, I believe he would choose someone under his command rather than going to Medici." Hirabergen agreed with Badil. However, Medici should be watching over Elitsa, but not under order the Solomon. Sasrur. Leodro interpreted him. It should be him, even though he went insane after everything that happened. The anchors brought by the entire Solomon Empire could have somewhat stabilized his state, and he would have had no difficulty locating the true problem within the empire. Lilith stated calmly. Leodro frowned as he heard that. While Amon Ines remained silent. "Well." As the discussion died down, Ocuses spoke up. "There won't be any issues with Sasrur, so let's get on with the business at hand." His vague comments deepened Leodro's frown, while Hirabergen's starry eyes twinkled, very much resembling like Dumbledore for Ocuses. They didn't speak up anymore, though. Amon Ines, Badil and Lilith remained silent as Ocuses' gaze finally fixed on the brass book on the platform. The brass book is Justiciar Uniqueness. Even though it is only a projection formed by the power of uniqueness, it is more than enough for the gods to see the truth of the matter. "Did you still have the Justiciar Uniqueness with you, Trunsoest?" Ocuses asked, his gaze fixed on Trunsoest. There is also a chance that Solomon could take the uniqueness after he attacked, and that the projection in front of them was made beforehand by Trunsoest. Trunsoest had gone silent in a daze after hearing the gods' discussion, which he could hear now, as they didn't seem to care about keeping him out. Sasrur. As in the Dark Angel under the Creator. Trunsoest was perplexed when he heard the gods refer to the true Creator as Sasrur. Didn't true Creator said to be a part of Creator? Could it be that Dark Angel as well? His thoughts came to a halt as he felt his instincts scream in danger, and immediately looked up, only to notice the sharp gaze of the eternal blazing Sunday. He didn't dare to think any further into it. Instead, he immediately controlled his thoughts in his mind using the method he devised. Trunsoest replied hoarsely, still trying to gather himself, "It is still with me, Your Excellency." "Did Solomon never suspect you?" Hirabergen inquired, his starry eyes twinkling. His question caused all the gods to turn to look solely at Turnost. "No." Trunsoest admitted, then he felt the pressure on his body increase exponentially, causing him to tremble, but he still didn't hesitate to continue. "However, I am free of the Emperor's suspicions since the Angel of Time was exposed as a traitor by the Emperor himself. The Emperor is now preoccupied with dealing with the avatars of the Angel of Time and the impending war. So the Emperor still asked me to be the guardian of uniqueness." Trunsoest felt dread rise within him as he said this, because many things he hadn't considered before became clear at the same time. The attack on the Solomon Empire by the eternal blazing sun was most likely aimed at Amun. Thus, exposing the Angel of Time's involvement to the Emperor, making the Angel of Time bear the entire blame, while suspicions on others would have been mostly cleared. Trunsoest felt nothing but awe and fear for eternal blazing Sunday. Haribergen's calmness faded as he heard the Trunsoest's words, and it was replaced by solemnity. While, Leodro's expression dignified, as he began tapping the armrest with his fingers. It's also fairly simple for them to deduce the same thing from Trunsoest's words. Meanwhile, Lilith's smile remained unaffected, and Badil stayed calm. However, it was difficult for anyone to gauge at Amanine's mood or expression, due to the gauze covering her face, which concealed everything. The atmosphere in the entire hall grew dismal by moment. Ocuses seemed unfazed by all of it, and stated, "All right, let's move on from the topic of uniqueness and focus on another important person." He paused for a moment before continuing. Bethel Abraham. Chapter 45, Bethel Abraham. Bethel Abraham. There was only silence among the gods after hearing that name. The silence was abruptly broken by a thunderous voice. Bethel Abraham is a major variable, if not a lethal threat. As his hand hammered on the armrest, sparks of lightning flashed all over him. Leodro stated this. "Even though he's just the king of angels, he has the power to thwart our plans. But Bethel isn't like the rest, Leodro. We should have a better understanding of this than others." Hirabergen reasoned, as all of the kings of angels under the Creator had encountered Bethel long before he became an angel. It doesn't change the fact that, with his might, Bethel Abraham poses a serious threat. He has the power to entirely decimate our forces. Badil concurred with Leodro on this point. Indeed, this may exacerbate the situation by forcing us to deal with him directly. Ultimately, during that chaotic war, it would completely destabilize our advantage. Lilith expressed her opinions as well. Leodro scowled when he heard Hirabergen and others. What if he's someone we've met before? How long had it been since we first met him? It was back when he wasn't even an angel. It's been over 1,000 years. He can't be the same person, as he was before. Leodro immediately refuted Hirabergen. However, I've heard that, he frequently wanders the cosmos and rarely stays on Earth. The Bethel Abraham that we knew, was the one didn't like restrictions and desired to be unrestricted and free. He even said that rather than staying here, his dream was to roam the sea of stars. Based on what I know about the events of the Solomon Empire and his position within the Solomon Empire, I believe my guess is mostly correct. After hearing that, Hirabergen did not back down, instead stating all of the facts to back up his words. What you just said makes him even more dangerous. He travels the cosmos, where the outer gods are present. After everything that happened with the Blood Moon, we can clearly see that the outer gods do not lack ways to reach into our world. Leodro exclaimed, as a tyrannical aura swept through the hall. Bethel Abraham will mostly not take Solomon's side. Amun-Ines finally spoke up, as a serene aura spread throughout the hall, dispersing the tyrannical aura. Control your power, Leodro. We have an angel with us. She said this as her serene aura enveloped the knelling Trunsoest, relieving him of the pressure and healing his injuries. Leodro snorted, completely indifferent about Turnost. Amun-Ines, do you know anything about Bethel? Hiraburgen inquired after hearing her words about Bethel. However, Amun-Ines remained strangely quiet, not answering his question. Ocuses, who had been silent previously, spoke up to silence any further discussion. Let's put this discussion to rest and ask Trunsoest himself about Bethel's situation. As for Cosmos, I believe Bethel is more than capable of surviving there. He spoke calmly. His words temporarily calmed the situation, and all of the gods focused on Trunsoest, who was able to stand after being healed by Amun-Ines. Trunsoest groaned in pain as he stood up with trembling legs. The aura of tyranny had earlier severely injured him, causing him to feel immense pain, as if his entire being had been torn apart and crushed. Even though the Evernight goddess aura provided reprieve from torture and pain, some after effects remained. Just then, a blaze of pure light fell on him, instantly alleviating all of his sequelae and restoring him to peak condition in an instant. Thank you, Your Excellency. Trunsoest bowed his head, taking a deep breath to calm himself. Despite his complicated feelings in his heart, which included a mix of hatred, fear, and helplessness, he didn't show much change on the surface, even after being treated in this manner. It's trivial. Ocuses stated flatly. Now tell us about Bethel Abraham's situation. Mr. Dor was last seen visiting the Emperor himself after Your Excellency's attack on the Empire. They had a disagreement. Trunsoest replied huskily. The Majesty was in a foul mood for a long time after the argument. Oh. Ocuses raised his brows in surprise, not expecting such a turn of events. How come that was? Trunsoest looked up to eternal blazing sun, slightly perplexed, as he reasoned that even this was under the sun god's arrangement. Nonetheless, he responded immediately. It was because of the Angel of Time, Your Excellency. Mr. Dor and Angel of Time were said to be on good terms throughout the Empire, and some even believed that they were friends. But, given their paths, I didn't believe it until Mr. Dor barged into the royal palace, following the banishment of the Angel of Time. Ocuses was speechless when he heard that. He was totally unaware of this. However, this did not come as a surprise, at least not for him, because he was well acquainted with Amun's eccentric personality. What a surprise! Lilith laughed. After hearing that, Leodro and Hiraburgen had strange expressions. It's unexpected. Badil muttered in surprise. In particular, it is Amun. How about Antigonus? Evernight unexpectedly asked about him, surprised, as she looked down at Trunsoest. Antigonus is also said to be friendly with Mr. Dor and the Angel of Time, but I'm not sure, milady. After a brief silence, Trunsoest responded. So it truly is. Amun-Ines thought, she, too, had heard about this, but she immediately dismissed this, due to the absurdity of the entire situation. But after hearing Trunsoest, she wasn't sure how she felt about it, but one thing was certain, the pathways of mysteries and beyonders of that pathways never ceases to amaze her. I didn't expect the cowardly trio to be a thing. Ocuses thought amusingly, recalling memes and pictures from his previous life. However, he was also certain that, with Amun involved, their friendship was far from simple. So, where has Bethel gone? Leodro inquired, starting at Trunsoest and putting immense pressure on the other. Your Excellency, Mr. Dor was last seen entering his home. Trunsoest said cautiously, under the gaze of Lord of Storms. Despite appearances, this entire situation reveals nothing. Hiraburgen expressed his disapproval. Bethel Abraham is not as simple as he appears to others. The other gods were silent in agreement, and while they may have found the previous news amusing, as Hiraburgen pointed out, it doesn't prove anything in the end. Indeed. Finally, Ocuses nodded in agreement. Bethel is a huge variable in our plan, and his intentions are still unknown to us. He paused and looked at Trunsoest. After this meeting, go to him and inform him that the 6 gods require his audience. Ocuses' voice was majestic and thunderous for Trunsoest, who was stunned by the order of the eternal blazing sun, but soon realization set in as he considered everything that had happened since meeting the Angel of Miracles. It really took him a long time to figure it out. Lilith smiled and mused. It's incredible how he managed to survive in a place like the Solomon Empire with his character. Trunsoest was jolted out of shock by Lilith's voice, and he looked around at the gods, who were all calm, as if they expected this. Yo-yo Mayan. He stumbled. Amun discovered my angel while meeting you, so what prevents Bethel from discovering it as well? Ocuses cut him off. However, Bethel is very different from Amun, which is why only Amun approached you. I will, Your Excellency. Trunsoest finally accepted the order while maintaining his composure. But, his heart was truly overwhelmed. It was terrifying to think that his betrayal had already been revealed to others and that his fate could have already been sealed. More importantly, he couldn't comprehend the gods, particularly the eternal blazing sun, who seemed to have considered everything and nothing seemed to escape his grasps or expectations. He was terrified and saddened by the prospect of working under someone like that in the future. However, his attention was immediately drawn forward when he noticed the gods rising from their silver thrones in unison after a brief conversation, and peering at him. A beam of darkness, pure light, twilight, as well as blot of lightning, a book, and finally a seed all appeared before him and struck his figure before he could react. He didn't feel any pain or discomfort, which perplexed him even more. To be honest, his emotions were on a roller coaster throughout the entire meeting with gods. Eternal Blazing Sun's majestic voice echoed in the hall. We, the 6 gods, bless you, Trunsoest, for your first mission, which you will know on the day of the war. Trunsoest, you will be first to usher in the new era with your own hand. Just as you had envisioned, the era of order and justice will arrive. So, don't let us down and then regret it. Trunsoest's consciousness sank into eternal darkness before he could even process that. Chapter 46, King of Angels. After the meeting with Trunsoest, the gods were still present in the White Castle. They were talking about the angels under them and the impending war. There's a more pressing matter, Lilith said as her face became solemn. And, we're avoiding it on purpose. She looked around and noticed Leodro and Herebergen's solemn expressions, but Oculus remained indifferent. That was never going to be avoided. As he turned to face Lilith, Oculus replied. I was planning to bring it up towards the end of the meeting, but it's not a problem now either. Adam, angel of imagination. The room was filled with an unsettling silence, and the gods, who had previously seemed indifferent and nonchalant, suddenly had serious expressions. Adam is an enigma that even I can't comprehend. Herebergen spoke quietly. Truth be told, he may pose the greatest threat to our plans, Leodro stated solemnly. Even Bethel pales in comparison, because we can understand Bethel's stance at least. But nothing is certain when it comes to Adam. Badil agreed with a nod. Adam's goals and intentions aren't as straightforward as he made them out to be. It's quite difficult to predict his next move or position, let alone whether he will participate in the upcoming war. Adam is an unknown area even to us. Lilith observed as she spoke her opinion. I believe it's safe to say, he will also be there in the impending war, Amon-Ines said ethereally. When Adam displayed the second blasphemy slate to many in the beginning of the epoch, he single-handedly guided history. So, he wouldn't want to miss such a historic event as a spectator. Her words just added to the heaviness of the situation. The gods aren't scared of Angel of Imagination, but Adam, like Bethel, has the capacity to undermine their advantage. Given that they are just facing 2 gods, it may appear to be excessive. But, killing a god has never been easy. What's more, Sasrar isn't an ordinary god. Adam. Finally, Oculus spoke up. He'll undoubtedly be present, as Amon-Ines stated. If he chooses to oppose us, which I believe is quite unlikely. Even if it comes to it, I'll confront him and keep him from meddling with the war. He already knew he'd be facing Adam in the war one way or another, so it didn't matter much to him in the end. After hearing Oculus's words, Lilith turned and stared at him with surprise. Others, particularly Leodro and Herebergen, were not much better, as they hadn't expected him to say such a thing. Oculus began speaking on the remaining issues before anyone else could ask more into this. Next, Medici and Ouroboros. The gods finally put their doubts and questions aside and focused on this after noticing his intentions. Ouroboros. Lilith pondered. The little guy will is enough face Ouroboros. She smiled as she thought of Will. Yes. Herebergen concurred with Lilith. I believe it is past time for that snake of Mercury to repay us for the asylum we granted him. Will Osepton was nearly killed by the true creator and Ouroboros, when they managed to save him, then granted him asylum. He frequently assisted the angels of their churches in dealing with various external matters in order to repay them. However, until now, the 6 gods had not directly demanded anything to him. Ouroboros is a king of angels who lacks uniqueness. Will should be more than enough to face him, Badil said, nodding. In accord, Leodro and Amon-Ines remained silent. So, it's settled. After listening to their opinions, Oculus pulled out a golden parchment from nowhere. The order for Will Septon was written on the parchment, which they had just discussed. He took a seal from his pocket and pressed it into the parchment. A golden sun insignia appeared on the edge of the parchment when he removed the seal. The golden parchment then vanished in a flash of light, having been sent to Diana by Ocuses. Medici is different. As he watched Ocuses finish, Leodro finally said something. In war, no one below the gods and kings of angels can stand a chance against him. Even if a large number of angels were to besiege him, they would just perish under his sword. Hirabergen agreed with Leodro on this, as they knew Medici better than the others. On the battlefield, his madness is unrivaled. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to state that he has left nothing but destruction in his wake. Medici is indeed a bit tricky. Ocuses stated in vague terms. But leave it to me to handle this. I've already have someone to deal with him. Are you referring to the new knowledge emperor under you? Lilith inquired, surprised, for she had deduced this from his words. Yes. With a nod, Ocuses confirmed it. You are sending your archangel to death. With a frown, Badil muttered to Ocuses. Because he and Ocuses are allies, he didn't hesitate to express his thoughts on the matter. I understand, Badil, Ocuses smiled. However, I am aware of what I am doing. He'd already planned a strategy for Medici and Diana. He will not send her to death. The Knowledge Emperor's power is complex, and he has already taught Diana how to fully utilize it. He will also bless her with the uniqueness of a hermit, which may help her even more in the battle. Badil sighed and abandoned his attempt to persuade Ocuses. I only hope your plan didn't screw up in the end, Ocuses. Leodro chastised. We can't afford any more chaos. Ocuses ignored him and turned to face Amon Isis, who was staring at him deeply. What's the deal with her? He was puzzled, but she gradually averted her gaze, as if nothing had happened. Nonetheless, he drew his attention back to the important situation, rather than thinking about her. Most of the issues within Solomon Empire have now been considered by us. Ocuses finished as he looked around. Only Bethel Abraham is left, so we'll have to wait a few more days. If he declines our order for his audience, we will still go ahead with our plans without any change. You think he'll say no? Leodro was amazed. It's actually rather possible. Lilith mused. Bethel Abraham could certainly do so. Ocuses gave a nod. If it comes to that, I will personally go and meet him, while ensuring his position in the war. More importantly, Bethel Abraham will not be welcomed in the new empire that emerges. He said indifferently. He's not going to let Bethel off the hook if he refuses even this. For them, the situation is already far too dire. Ocuses continued in a light tone, after taking their silence as agreement. Let us now move on to the final issue. Salinger and Cheek. Chapter 47, Death and Demonis. Salinger. Gods focused first on the god of death and then looked at Amon Ines and Badil, as they might the only ones to have more knowledge about death. Ocuses also recalled everything he knew about Salinger. To become a sequence 0 for the death pathway, one must first construct an underworld and become the sole ruler of all spirits and the dead. Even though death pathway rituals for advancement eventually lay the foundation for the underworld, it is still not an easy to completely this apotheosis ritual. The ancient goddess of death, who built the underworld, was only able to complete it because she had some authority over the door, which aided her immensely. Then, ancient sun god invaded the underworld at the end of the second epoch. He let the light shine on the dark underworld, destroying almost the entire underworld and leaving only the Calderon city and ruins behind. During the war, the ancient goddess of death also died under the light of the ancient sun god, and the one who inherited her characteristics and uniqueness was Salinger, as he was her subsidiary god at that time. Salinger used these characteristics to rise to the position of King of Angels at the end of the third epoch. He also joined Rose Redemption and took part in the final war. After the fall of the ancient sun god, he conquered the southern continent and established the Balaam Empire. For the sake of balance at the time, Solomon also did not attack or conquer the southern continent. This alone ensured that Salinger faced no opposition to his rule over the southern continent. After knowing all of the future events, Ocuses had some ideas about how Salinger managed to ascend to godhood. Not long after him, at the start of the fourth epoch, Salinger ascended to become death. Before that, Amon Ines and Badil both declared open war on Salinger. After all, it's much easier for them to kill a king of angels than to face each other. Under their combined pressure and assault, Salinger was forced to ascend because it was the only way he could survive. Ocuses guessed that Salinger should have used the ruins of the underworld as a foundation for his own. Other than this, he didn't have many options to speak of. Ocuses also knew things couldn't be that simple. The ancient goddess of death must have left behind plans for her resurrection in her underworld, which Salinger should have foiled. But this didn't really matter much in the end. Salinger ascended to become death. He completely changed after that. As wars continued to erupt between them, unlike Badil and Amon-Ines, who personally went to the battlefield, Salinger was never seen again. Through his spies in Byam, Ocuses had some knowledge of Salinger's situation. Salinger was said to rarely leave the underworld. He even recently appointed his son, Azek Eggers, as his ruler of his kingdom and retreated to the underworld completely. Others may find this situation perplexing, but Ocuses finds it to be otherwise. He is certain that this entire Salinger situation involves the river of eternal darkness. If it involves that, even he can't pry any further. Ocuses will also never allow Salinger to live past the War of Four Emperors because he knows what exactly happened in the future. He will ensure that death itself dies. Ocuses put his jumbled thoughts aside when he heard Badil speak up. Badil reflected. There's not much news about Salinger after he became a god. Despite the fact that we had conflicts, he never came to the battlefield. Given the presence of Amon-Ines in the war, I also did not invade his kingdom after his absence. Despite the presence of Amon-Ines here, he did not hesitate to state the facts clearly. The most recent thing I heard about him was that he appointed his son as Emperor of Byam and even gave him complete control over the Byam Empire itself. Salinger has an eccentric personality, that for sure. Leodro mused. However, I think it's unlikely that he would dare to involve himself in matters of northern continent. He dismissed death with a casual wave of his hand, as if Salinger was nothing. Oh, if only he knew. Ocuses found it amusing, as he thought of the future. Hirabergen and Lilith remained silent about death, then they turned to look at Amon-Isis, hoping for her to speak. After some silence, Amon-Ines said slowly. We don't have to be that concerned about his participation in the upcoming war. Despite the fact that Salinger's situation is unclear in general, I am fairly certain that Salinger has fallen asleep. Despite having more wild assumptions, she did not elaborate further. She also very much hopes that her speculations will turn out to be false. Sleep? Leodro inquired, perplexed. What could have pushed him into that? Ocuses intervened just in time to prevent this conversation from continuing. It's no longer relevant, Leodro. But, at the very least, we can be somewhat certain that Salinger will not intervene in the upcoming war. He concluded, as Leodro fixed his angry gaze on him. While Badil was heavy, Haribergen's starry eyes twinkled and his expression was thoughtful, and Lilith remained calm. Now let's move on to Cheek. Ocuses continued, ignoring Leodro once more, much to his chagrin. I think it's safe to say. Lilith stated. After the war, there will be another god. The conditions for the apotheosis ritual for the Demonis arrive completely with the war. Hirabergen said calmly. Cheek will not pass up this opportunity. Indeed, Ocuses nodded. As a result, we'll keep an eye out for her. If the circumstances permit, we can interfere with her ritual, as ascension of Cheek will undoubtedly result in calamity second only to cataclysm. However, if things don't improve, let her ascend to godhood, because we already have a lot on our plates. We can deal with the Cheek later, as well as the aftermath of her ascension. Other than that, there was nothing else they could do. To be honest, Ocuses wants Cheek to ascend to godhood. If he can get her on his side during the War of the Four Emperors, it will help him a lot. As for Cheek becoming an evil god among the world in the future, he couldn't care less. There is no such thing as good and evil for gods. There was only silence among the gods, after he said that. And, Ocuses took their silence for agreement and then waved his hand, and a golden parchment appeared before him. The golden parchment emitted a terrifying aura, that even archangels may not be able to bear. Alliance of Six Gods. The heading was boldly written at the top of the golden parchment. It also contained a number of articles. Ocuses took out a golden quill and poured his authority into it before signing his name on the end of parchment. Pass it on. The gods also signed their names after carefully reading and observing it. However, Leodro was dissatisfied after reading some articles that imposed many restrictions, but he still signed it reluctantly, after seeing everyone else do so. Ocuses finally obtained the golden parchment bearing the signatures and authorities of Six Gods and gazed at it for a while. Finally, he declared, in the light of the sun. Let the angels blow the horns of war. Underscore 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 underscore. The next day, as the northern continent descended into complete chaos, a handsome man appeared out of thin air in front of tall mountains, with prim facial features and hair which exerts a blackness that rivals the void, with a small amount of white hairs mixed in. His eyes are cerulean blue, with irises that resemble layers upon layers of rippling cerulean waves stacked on top of one another. The man took out his pocket watch and checked the time. He then spoke with a smile. Ocuses, eternal blazing Sunday. Amon Isis, Evernight Goddess. Then he proceeded to recite all 6 gods' honorific names, and most importantly, he did not forget to call out the gods' names as well. Chapter 48, Corruption. As the man finished reciting the gods' names, a dreadful aura descended. Instead of blue sky, the white clouds that had blanketed the sky had blown away, revealing the boundless cosmos. The 6 gods appeared in front of the man, their mountain-sized figures staring down at the man who dared to utter their names. Bethel Abraham. Leodro grumbled. Can you give me one good reason why I shouldn't attack you right way, for daring to call our names? Bethel Abraham looked at the gods that floated before him, unaffected by their divine gazes and auras. He then focused on Leodro and reasoned calmly. You were all the first to request an audience. So, other than calling your names, how can I hope to catch your attention? Do you expect me to knock on the doors of all your divine kingdoms? He stated it with a shrug and a smile on his lips. Don't try to be clever around us. As terrifying blots of lightning flashed across Leodro's figure, his voice became indifferent. Other gods simply stood on the sidelines and looked on in silence. Enough. Ocuses said, while glaring at Leodro. We're already out of time, Leodro, there must be no more mishaps or chaos. When Leodro heard Ocuses, he snorted. But the lightning that had flashed across his body had vanished. Bethel Abraham gazed at the sun god that floated before him, and just by looking at him, he felt the immense authority and power that other possessed. He even had the feeling that he was looking at a literal sun surrounded by an infinite ocean of light. His calmness faded, gradually being replaced by solemnity. He was well aware that the sun god he was facing was no ordinary deity. The sun god also gave him a strange and frightening feeling, similar to how he felt when he first met the ancient sun god in Amon Isis. Bethel's mind was racing with questions. He'd met Ocuses before, back in the Third Epoch, but hadn't felt the same way. He didn't know if his sequence level was too low at the time to perceive anything, but he also met the ancient sun god in Amon Isis not long after. So he couldn't put his finger on this entire situation, which confused him more. Bethel Abraham. Ocuses said, state your position in the war. Think twice before responding to us though. A white spear appeared in his hand, and he looked at the Bethel projection indifferently. Bethel is not physically present, he would have been a literal fool if he had arrived to meet us in his true body. 4. You cannot bear the consequences of a wrong choice. As no one has survived being on the wrong side of history. So, Bethel, make a wise choice. His majestic voice reverberated in the air. Despite witnessing Ocuses' spear in his hands, Bethel kept his composure. Ocuses' words, or more accurately, threat, resonated in his ears. I come in peace. He spoke after a brief silence, as if he had been contemplating. I will stand alongside you all in the ongoing war and assist Trunsoest when the time comes. Ocuses put away his spear and said indifferently. Bethel, state your demands. In the new era, I demand a standing equal to 6 of you. Bethel stated his demands, with solemnity. Silence. Amon Isis were taken aback by Bethel's demand, and others weren't much better. Insolence. A tyrannical aura pressed over Bethel, causing him to shudder for a brief period before returning to normal. Bethel Abraham, know your place. Leodro exclaimed, as the entire continent under them quaked, signifying his wrath. The entire northern continent began to quake more, but Lilith waved her hand just in time to stop it. Your power cannot change the facts. Hirabergen said in solemn voice. You're our only king of angels, Bethel Abraham, not a god. You cannot ask for such audacious demands. Actually, Hirabergen can see that after Bethel's bold demand is denied, he would soon follow up with his actual and true one. It's merely a tried and true tactic. Nonetheless, his first demand was utterly out of his league. Even if another god were there in his place, they would not make such a demand. On Bethel Abraham's glabella, there was an illusory blue symbol that looked like doors stacked on top of each other, which allowed him to somewhat resist Leodro's tyrannical aura. Abraham Bethel heard the god's words but was unmoved by them, focusing entirely on Oculus. No. Oculus eventually denied his demands. Bethel wasn't surprised, now he intended to convey Oculus his true demands. The eternal blazing sun, on the other hand, smiled as he interpreted him. How about this, Bethel Abraham? You can be free from the new empire's order and rules, exactly as you've always desired. You are, nevertheless, still under us. Before leaving for the cosmos, you must notify us at all times. This is the best we can do for you. The gods looked at Bethel as their divine aura exploded from them, crushing down on him and exerting great pressure. As he heard the offer, Bethel fell silent, and the symbol of the door on his glabella darkened due to the aura of 6 gods pressing on him. When the sun god interrupted him, he realized he had completely lost his advantage. He is now unable of making counter-demands in this scenario. It appears that I have changed a lot without even realizing it. He thought. His perception of world completely changed as he traveled through the cosmos and saw the immense civilizations there, as well as the outer gods that pray and rule the cosmos. So, when he made the first demand, he didn't think much of it because, even if he isn't God, he is close, all he has to do now is finish the ritual. The gods, he reasoned, would not be angered because they could all see the truth. Bethel's lips pressed together in a thin line as he realized he couldn't take the aura of 6 gods any longer. He finally nodded. I accept. However, neither Oculus nor the other gods noticed a weird flash of crimson light over Bethel's blue eyes. Ironically, even Bethel himself didn't notice anything was wrong. The next day. Northern continent, no man's land. The once uninhabited border between the Solomon Empire and the 6 kingdoms is now dyed with fire and blood. Dark and gloomy clouds blanketed the sky, with scarlet and blue lightning striking each other from time to time. A mythical war was taking place in the midst of it all, with the towering fire giant slashing at 2 angles with a sword that was bathing in the fire. A black-haired woman dressed in an ascetic robe wielded a bone-white blade that seemed to radiate pure darkness, her countenance serious as she saw a blazing sword approaching her. A man dressed in white armor stood next to her, blonde hair and brilliant eyes. He glided close to her with 2 white wings on his back and a sword that shined with light on his sword. Lucas, the angel of light, and Selena, the angel of concealment, were the 2 angels. They were facing an angel of red division of Empire Army, which served the war angel himself. And, this was just one of the battles across the no man's land. Let's attack together! Lucas shouted, his golden eyes sparkling, indicating that he had no intention of backing down. Selena only replied with a simple nod. Serena's body faded and entered a concealed state, then she reappeared behind the giant, slashing at him with her bone sword. Lucas also slashed out his white sword at the massive sword of fire, that was descending towards him. On the battlefield, a massive sword slash of light and darkness appeared. Boom! When the light slash collided with the burning sword, a burst of light and fire erupted across the battlefield, destroying everything in its path. Meanwhile, the flame giant was completely distracted by the explosion, allowing the slash of the darkness to entirely land on the giant's back. Roar! Boom! The fire giant roared in pain as it crashed to the ground, unable to keep its balance after being attacked by 2 angels. While looking at the flaming giant, Selena and Lucas landed on the earth. The flame giant was hurt but not killed. If they want to slay the flame giant, they had to fully unleash their mythical creature form, exactly like the flame giant, and use all of their strength. Selena shifted her gaze to Lucas, intending to speak with him about the situation. Just then, before they could even react, a flash of red light emerged out of nowhere and passed through their necks. Selena's head separated from her neck and plummeted to the ground, gushing blood erupted from the severed neck, splashing all around. Lucas's face was splashed with crimson blood, and his eyes were filled with terror and dread. He was too shocked to realize that just as the red light neared his neck, his entire body turned into pure light, saving him from certain death. Oh! In the battlefield, an eerie voice echoed. I never anticipated Oculus to be so concerned about his angels. It's rather ironic. As the voice ended, a man emerged from the red blaze of flames, wielding a crimson sword, the tip of which hung down to the earth. He was dressed in black armor that seemed to be splashed with blood. He had red hair that resembled fire, looking young and handsome. The red sword continued to be dragged across the battlefield as the red-haired man marched ahead, causing the earth to be ripped apart with bursts of crimson flames. Lucas was totally paralyzed in terror and the vicious aura emanating from the red-haired man, who grabbed his chin and forced him to gaze straight into the other's crimson eyes. "Let's see if killing you causes anguish to Ocuses." With a crazy smile, the red-haired man said. When he mentioned the name of the eternal blazing sun, though, his eyes glowed with hatred. Chapter 49, Medici. Lucas was terrified. No, it was too underwhelming to put it that way. Just being close to the man paralyzed him to the core, his thoughts slowing and consciousness clouding by the minute. He desperately tried to use his remaining strength, but his illusions were quickly shattered as he felt the heavy aura pressing down on him like a mountain, rendering him unable to move any part of his body. He felt his chin being grabbed, and his gaze met the red-haired man's crimson eyes. Everything in his vision slowly faded into darkness, but the crimson eyes remained, haunting him. In the crimson eyes, he saw reddish fires burning brightly like stars, illuminating the darkness. He began to see visions in which the red-haired man left nothing but disaster in his wake. Mountains of corpses of mythical creatures lay on the battlefield as the red-haired man sat on top of it covered in blood, yet the craziness and madness in his eyes and smile didn't fade despite the scene before him. It went on and on. He saw innumerable battles of the red-haired man, and his mind went almost insane, unable to stand it any longer. The visions didn't end, though, they kept coming back. The frightening visions repeated over and over in his mind, seeking to dismantle him into the last of his pieces. His consciousness became blurry, and he felt as if he were falling down at the last moment. Then his blurry vision saw the dark river flowing with no beginning or end, towards which he was falling. Is this it? His entire life flashed before his eyes in the last moments, finally focusing on 3 pictures, one of which was him swearing his loyalty to his lord, another was him dancing with Diana in the ball, and finally, it was him smiling with Diana, Blaise and Edward while enjoying the holidays that we rarely got. In the end, he felt regret and pain. "I'm sorry, Diana. I broke my promise." When his figure arrived just before the dark river, a burst of pure light erupted from the void, illuminating the entire darkness. It also submerged him completely. In the battlefield, a terrifying aura of destruction erupted, freezing everything across the no man's land. The blots of crimson and blue lightning that had been colliding in dark clouds against each other vanished as if erased, as did the majority of the angels' attacks across the battlefield. The angels felt suffocating aura covers everything around them, as screams of the pain and terror sounded everywhere. Medici looked up with interest, as he swatted Lucas away, causing the other to fly across and crash into the ground, leaving a trail of blood before stopping. Lucas' eyes were closed, blood streaming from them, and his face was as pale as a corpse. While, he was completely motionless, as if he died. But, his chest, on the other hand, moved up and down weakly, implying otherwise. An ancient spear blazed towards Medici, annihilating everything in its path, including matter itself. The spear was dyed crimson from tip to handle, and it emitted a horrifying aura of destruction, as though it could harm even a true deity. Spear of Longinus. This spear had once appeared in an ancient era that couldn't be traced back, stained with the blood of a great existence. Through mythical reenactment, it has now descended into no man's land. The arrival of the legendary spear absolutely threw the entire war into disarray. At long last, something interesting. Medici spoke as his smile grew frenzied. His figure erupted with terrifying bloodlust, instantly covered the entire no man's land. He cast a glance at the approaching ancient spear before raising his sword and pointing it at the sky. The entire cloudy sky was lit up with crimson light, which could be seen across the northern continent. Medici then swung his sword down, directly at the ancient spear. Boom! A blot of crimson lightning descended from the crimson sky, submerging the ancient spear with enough power to make the Tsar bomb look like firecrackers. Boom! A terrifying explosion ensued, forming a semi-sphere of chaotic energy that pulsated visibly, as if it possessed limitless power and was poised to leave nothing but total annihilation in its wake. Seeing this, Medici merely waved his hands as crimson flames erupted around the semi-sphere of energy, completely submerging and consuming it within. Just then, a flash of light appeared behind Medici, forming a sword and trying to stab him in the back. Medici smirked as he turned back in an instant before the sword could reach him and grabbed the sword with his bare hands while looking at women in black armor. "Oh," Medici said, his voice surprised. "I didn't expect to see such an act of love after all this time. The angels of Ocuses are full of surprises." He spoke, while looking at Lucas, who was surrounded by purple light and teleporting away from the battlefield. Diana, the angel of wisdom, is the woman in black armor. You bastard! Diana roared, her eyes filled with rage, and she didn't hesitate to grab the sword even tighter the next second after her attack failed. The sword in their hands broke apart into fundamental blocks of information, which immediately went to Medici's mind. Diana, on the other hand, did not hesitate to attack again. She attempted to instill a vast amount of useless knowledge and miscellaneous information into Medici's mind. She didn't hold back, either out of rage at seeing Lucas in that state or knowing she was facing a man who had fought side by side with her lord in the past. However, all illusory information, whether it came from the sword or was sent by Diana, was set ablaze with crimson flames. The crimson flames completely burned the information itself, destroying it. Medici said with a grin, his crimson eyes glowed. It's my turn now. While continuing, he looked up at the crimson sky. So, what are you going to do now to save your precious little lover? Boom! A blot of crimson lightning fell from the sky, slashing right at the figure of Lucas, whose teleportation had been completely disrupted by Medici's tampering with the spirit world, which rendered all spirit world travel useless across the battlefield. No! Diana screamed as she saw the lightning, her eyes filled with panic and fear. She didn't hesitate to use her most powerful move. At that precise moment, Medici appeared in front of Diana, filling the other's eyes with horror. Slap! A resounding slap echoed across no man's land. Medici slapped her away before she could even perform her supposedly powerful move. Diana felt the entire world before her spin, and she felt light. Everything in her vision was moving so fast that it took her a moment to realize what had happened. However, it was already too late. She felt her vision become cloudy and her mouth fill with blood as she used her last remaining strength to only see the crimson lightning descending on Lucas in the distance. Lucas! Her heart-wrenching roar echoed across the battlefield. Chapter 50, Conqueror. 10 minutes ago. In an army camp on the outskirts of No Man's Land. The No Man's Land is a stretch of land between the Solomon Empire and the Six Kingdoms that has become uninhabitable and dangerous due to years of incessant warfare and battles. In the center of the camp, people were seen discussing inside a large tent, in front of a table with an illusory display that realistically showed everything happening in No Man's Land. This was one of Artisan's inventions, which he personally sent to the Alliance of Six Gods to express his goodwill to the Six Gods. While an old man could be seen meditating on the corner of the tent, the man was Horus, angel under the god of knowledge and wisdom. He was in charge of communicating directly with the gods and relaying their instructions to angels here. 4 angels have already fallen on your side, while only 2 have fallen on the Empire's side. On the second day of the war, we are already at a disadvantage. The angels of the Solomon Empire's nobles' families have already joined the war. Augustus and Zaratol family angels are already battling us in the second and third sectors of No Man's Land. We just learned that another has died. The entire situation within the tent was chaotic, as angels of Six Gods kept discussing and arguing with each other. This would be a disaster for us if the battle only remained in No Man's Land. We should launch a frontal assault with all of our troops. A man in blue robes declared, as lightning flashed across his fingers. Are you crazy? Israel. The entire Solomon Empire is enveloped in the twisted rules of the Black Emperor. The moment we enter the Empire, our fate is sealed. A black-haired man in a silver suit refuted, while pointing to the Empire projection on the table. They were Blaze Larson, Angel of Miracles, and Israel, Angel of Calamity. The gods are on our side, Blaze. Israel said, as he glared at Blaze. The other angels in the tent went silent as they turned to face them. Blaze said, pointing up. The gods above are watching everything that happens here. If they had wanted that, they already have told us so. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, Israel. Blaze approached him and gently advised. Not only have you lost someone on the battlefield now, but many more are falling as we speak. Israel remained silent, his blue eyes gleaming as he gazed at Blaze, and sparks of lightning extended from his fingers, covering his figure. As he looked at this, Blaze's eyes were indifferent. His right hand, however, had been inside his pocket at some point. He and Israel never liked each other, and even though they are now allies, it cannot erase the fact that they were enemies who fought against each other for the glory of their lords for long times. What are you two doing? Stop right now! Other angels stepped in right away to stop them. Despite this, neither of them moved away in the least. Enough! A flat yet powerful voice rang out, capturing their attention and making them to look at the entrance. A black-haired woman in an armor stood with a few scrolls in her hands. Diana, Angel of Wisdom. Diana looked at them all and then spoke up, her voice clear and loud. You're all misinterpreting the entire war. This war was never intended for us. We will not invade the Solomon Empire. This has always been a war of gods. Diana stepped forward to clarify the situation. Not every god is particularly concerned with his or her angels. Their instructions from the other gods were vague, only stating that they should hold the no man's land and nothing else. This was also one of the source of the current crisis. They had no idea what to do next and were completely perplexed. There was only silence in the tent as the angels digested the information. Diana wanted to continue, but just then, a divine aura descended on the tent. The old man in the corner, who was meditating, opened his eyes, which were filled with light rather than irises. The old man turned to face Diana, ignoring all the angels. Diana knew who was staring at her, as the only one who could speak through Horus, was God of knowledge and wisdom. In the tent, a distant voice echoed. Medici has entered the war. Without waiting for a response, the divine aura receded and the old man closed his eyes, returning to his meditative state, but his complexion was much paler. Diana didn't think twice after hearing that, bolting out of the tent, completely ignoring the angel's questions. Wait a second, Diana. She paused and turned to face Blaze, who had followed her out of the tent. You are not joining me, Blaze. Diana stated sternly, without giving him the opportunity to speak first. The War Angel is king of angels, but more importantly, he is a conqueror. You will be completely paralyzed by his mere presence, and lose all will to fight. A conqueror is a terrifying existence, and their mere presence ensures victory during a war. They can use their authority to turn someone into a puppet, robbing others of their free will. They also have the ability to easily manipulate emotions, which can be detrimental in war. Their abilities related to war goes on and on. She continued after noticing Blaze's unwavering determination. I know Lucas is out there on the battlefield, I promise he'll be fine. Diana, listen to me. Blaze yelled, finally silencing her. You'll need me for that. The Holy Sword. When you are in a critical situation, you cannot visualize that sword using authority of knowledge in an instant. It would place an enormous burden on you and will take time, during which you would be completely vulnerable to an attack. Diana, you need me at that precise moment. Diana hesitated, knowing what Blaze said was true. However, she prepared a plan for that, in which both she and Will Osepton would enter the battlefield together to face the King of Angels and cover for each other at that time. Will, on the other hand, had recently been summoned by their lord and she had no idea when he would return. Lucas was on the battlefield, so she couldn't wait any longer. As she thought of Luke, she had the uneasy feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Oculus' voice appeared in their minds just as she was about to agree to Blaze. Blaze, you will be taking over the mission that Lucas was assigned. When Blaze and Diana heard their lord, they were taken aback. Then, Blaze nodded, though he was reluctant in his heart. Don't worry, by the end of the day, everyone will be fine. Oculus' reassuring voice echoed in their minds once more. He didn't wait for their response as a beam of pure light descended on their figures, teleporting them to different locations via the medium of light. The 6 gods sat at the same white table in the divine kingdom of Oculus, watching projections, which displayed the battlefield in no man's land. Then, they all saw the spear of Longinus descending on the battlefield. Leodro and Hirabergen were surprised, while Amonis's eyes behind the gauze were complex. Is that mythical reenactment or authority of knowledge? Leodro asked Oculus, as he wanted to confirm personally to him. Mythical reenactment. Oculus said, his clear eyes still fixed on Medici and Lucas on the screen. I've always assumed that the majority of the stories told by the creator were purely fictitious. Hirabergen couldn't hide his surprise. Based on this, he has already begun to plan on creating new techniques. Oculus recalled, after hearing Hirabergen and Leodro. The ancient sun god did indeed tell them about the legend of Longinus' spear, but he left out many details and gave them a hazy account. He understands why ancient sun god said it that way, that spear of Longinus directly involved God Almighty. The spear was entirely real in this world, not a work of fiction. Oculus knows this because Bernadette summoned this spear using mythical reenactment in the original future. He also only told Diana the hazy version given by the ancient sun god. He already knew that anything involving a pillar was extremely dangerous, and this thought only reinforced what had happened before. so he didn't dare to tell Diana the entire mythology. He also had inkling, that if he had done that, something catastrophic would have occurred. Occus's attention was drawn back to the projection by Leodro's laugh. Medici is still the same. Leodro laughed louder, while glaring at Occus's. I warned you before, Occus's. Badil sighed. The screen showed Medici slapping Diana away. While his gaze remained fixed on the screen, Occus's ignored Leodro and said, "They'll be fine." On the battlefield, just as the crimson lightning was about to fall on the figure of Lucas, the clouds in the sky were swept away, revealing a massive, illusory, scaleless snake. The dense patterns and symbols on the surface of the gigantic silver snake formed a wheel that was connected to each other. Around each wheel were different symbols. With a sweep of its cold, bright red eyes, the massive serpent floated above the battlefield, curling its body and biting its own tail. Its shadow covered the entire battlefield like a mysterious and ludicrous wheel. Reboot.
Thanks for listening.